Jason here. It has been a while since I've been able to actually sit and write things down, since the Afghanistan incident. And maybe it's for the best. Things have been, well, different, for the lack of a better term. I was told we'll be in touch, and was sent back to Virginia with my bags packed and a series of unanswered questions, courtesy of my new 3-letter friends. It was a big letdown, but our paths ended up crossing once more under more bloody circumstances. With that being said, I'll start from the top and work my way down this bloody rabbit hole that I have found myself crawling through. Virginia Beach, 2200 hours, local time. Brock's pissed, bro. He was just about to win in our little tableside game of blackjack. Smith's voice was carried from behind me as I walked past a group of MPs who were rotating out for a new shift. Just another night at the Naval Air Station. How's Anne doing? Smith asked next, eyeing one of the support staff members who rushed from the lobby over to an open office door as we entered the main structure. She's doing good. She let me swing by and talk with her for a bit before the call went out. I lied and looked behind us to see the rest of the team trickling in from the crowded parking lot outside. Where's Brock? I asked next, scanning the group in an attempt to find the boss, only to come up empty. Smith, now by my side, nodded towards the skiff further inside the building. He's already talking with the skipper as usual, bro. I grunted at the thought of another dry op that was probably being laid out for us. Tex, good to have you back. I was beginning to think you joined the dark side. An old, familiar voice full of grit and experience spoke up from behind me as the rest of the team began to place their phones in the secure containers mounted to the wall next to the reinforced door. Behind me stood a short, stocky man with a golden farmer's tan who was wearing a tattered and faded Yankees cap that had gone through multiple deployments all over the globe. David, good to see you. I extended out an open hand towards my old instructor with a heartfelt smile. Hell, I thought you loved the instructor life. What are you doing back here? I'm a temporary gun until you and Brock make your pick. He shook my hand as he spoke. I plan on helping out with that once we get back from wherever we're going. A smile formed on his face for a second before his gaze shifted uncomfortably. Ready to save the world? I asked, changing subjects as David slid his phone into the container. Always, brother, was his only reply as we entered the room. Excited glances were cast around to one another as I took my seat next to Brock, who looked rather pissed as he rolled up the sleeves to his formal white shirt. Alright, gents, listen up. We are on a short fuse here, so pay attention. Our skipper spoke as he stepped up to the head of the table, while our intel specialists continued to work endlessly without batting an eye in our direction. The seasoned officer moved to the side as the screens mounted on the wall behind him flashed on. This here is Al-Bahim. A smiling Middle Eastern man with the looks of an A-list actor filled one of the screens. According to our OGA friends, he managed to get his hands on some very nasty biological samples on a trip through South America and was caught trying to sell them on the market. The air felt like it was sucked out of the room as the mood shifted. Thankfully, our friends at the agency set up a fake buy and were able to obtain 2 of the 3 samples before he departed. Great, another asshole who wants to get rich quick and end the world in one sweep. Now, Al-Bahim was previously working with AQ and other extremist groups all over the Mid-East and Southeast Asia before splitting off and trying to make a name for himself. He's on the chopping block now, gentlemen. This is a kill op. Our skipper pointed towards a topographical map of Africa as a satellite image overlay appeared on one of the screens. The region he's held up in is currently undergoing a massive civil war. According to recent reports, there have been mass shootings and looting with this ongoing conflict, so expect high civilian and enemy presence. Any questions so far? The room remained silent for a few seconds before Brock raised a finger. Weapons and resistance? One of the female intel specialists standing next to the skipper nodded and stepped up to the table. Expect AKs, RPGs, and potential fixed emplacements. Local fighters were observed patrolling the target area in big numbers, so try to get in and out quickly. We don't have a QRF for this one, so you'll be rolling around in Indian territory without any cavalry to back you up if things go sideways. A thermal image of a busy city block popped up on a screen behind them, as ant-sized white glowing figures milled about lazily while the larger vehicles sped past on the narrow streets. Thankfully for us though, there's a total media blackout on the situation, so no one knows what's going on down there right now. But there's no telling when the blackout will be lifted. Are we taking wheels or jumping in? I asked next, while jotting down a few notes. Wheels. We have a small detachment of SAS operators that will be joining you on this op. According to recent updates from the OGA team, he went with a small convoy into the city and hasn't left since. Oh boy, a joint op with the tea sippers. This keeps getting better and better. Our skipper gave us a simple nod and stepped over to our large whiteboard next to the table as we covered our contingency plans and exfil routes in case things went bad once we hit the ground and started working. Africa? Here we come. Joint Task Force Compound, 1400 hours, local time. I slipped on my pair of sunglasses and stepped in behind Brock as we entered through the front gate of the compound. This heat is downright evil, man. Smith groaned as two shirtless operators started field stripping their rifles and talking amongst themselves under the shade of an improvised lean-to made out of camo netting and aluminum posts off to our left. Hey, does this place remind you of anything, Tex? Smith suddenly asked out of nowhere as he hefted his gear back over his shoulder while looking around at the dust-coated tables and workout equipment surrounding us. I glanced around and chuckled. The Tijuana prison you somehow managed to escape? I was thinking more of your busted-up excuse of a ranch house, but that works too. He chuckled in response while spitting a stream of tobacco juice into a water bottle that was almost completely filled with the brown liquid. Well, look at what the hyenas drug in, a hardened British voice called out from our front, causing Brock to stop dead in his tracks in front of the sleek-looking talk that stood out from the bland white-colored chews and plywood structures surrounding it. Captain Miller? Good to see you, sir. Brock walked up to the meadow steps in stride and shook the man's hand. The captain had a well-kept black beard and stood a good foot taller than Brock, but lacked the height and swagger of the steely-eyed frock man standing across from him. Drop the sir shit, Master Chief. You know me better than that. Where's Lieutenant Commander Lucas? He still owes me a pint after saving his ass in Mosul. Captain Miller frowned while looking over the group. He's on the other side now, I answered before Brock could. It had only been a few months since our OIC had passed, but it still felt like it was yesterday since we had been kicking in doors and snatching bodies back in Iraq and Syria. I'm sorry to hear that. I'll have to buy him one in turn when I meet him in the Great Hall. There was a few seconds of awkward silence, until a woman wearing an OCP uniform with an officer insignia on the collar poked her head out from the talk and asked for the captain to step back inside. Get settled in, then we can talk. He gave Brock another handshake and disappeared back into the darkened interior of the talk as a very pissed-off blonde-haired woman exited shortly after. I'm surprised you vampires haven't burst into flames yet. The woman smirked as she pulled out a pack of cigarettes from the breast pocket of her flannel shirt. Jason? She mumbled while lighting the cigarette hanging from her lips as she walked towards the front gate, getting more than a few glances from the other operators in the courtyard as she strutted past them. Who the hell was she? David tilted his head to the side and cocked an eyebrow at me as he flipped his Yankees cap forward in an attempt to get some relief from the assaulting sun rays beating down on us. She looks familiar. Was that one of the contractor chicks you've been hitting up, Jason? Smith jabbed as he held out his open can of snuff in my direction. She does look familiar. I denied the offer with a small wave as we crossed the massive gravel courtyard. David was about to speak when a thin, pale man wearing a pair of Rhodesian-style short shorts and sleeveless dirty combat shirt greeted us with a wave. Who the hell is this guy? The man walked out from one of the small workout stations and stopped in front of me and Smith. I'm Corporal Hicks. The macho man voice didn't fit the skeletonized frame of the SAS operator, but I learned a long time ago not to judge a door kicker by his size. He, without any invitation, walked with us over to what I can only describe as a plywood mansion and a small cluster of chews that spanned the southwestern section of the compound, while going on about the previous operations he'd been on in an attempt to impress us. Right then, I'm looking forward to with you gentlemen. Hicks lingered, eyeing the rest of the group with childlike awe and admiration. We're good here, Corporal. Thank you. Tell Captain Miller that I'll be by shortly. Brock shook the kid's hand and headed towards his own housing unit without a second glance. Thanks for the tour, Skeletor. Smith clapped Hicks's shoulder and hid it inside the chew that we'd be sharing, as the others dispersed to their own quarters while talking amongst themselves. Scribbles and carvings lined the walls and racks inside our quarters. They were all mementos from those who were here before us, and soon we'd add our own to the growing mural that would eventually be found by someone else. You going to get a workout in before the meet and greet? Smith asked as he unpacked his bags and rifle case. Yeah, are you going to join me? You're starting to get a little chubby, I joked while changing. I'll have to pass on this round. I need to talk to Amanda and the kids. Smith looked up from his rifle as he spoke. Don't pull a muscle, old man. We're working tonight, remember? I gave Smith a single finger salute and stepped out into the scorching dry summer heat. What went out there, Jason? Smith looked up from his dated laptop as I peeled off my sweat-soaked shirt and tossed it on top of the Pelican cases housing the rest of my gear. PT, you missed it because you decided to sit in here and watch movies and shit, I joked while grabbing a clean towel and a fresh set of clothes. I'm not talking about PT, Jason. Smith let out a sigh and closed the laptop as he got up from his rack. Ever since you came back. He eyed the fading scar on my neck where a life-ending bullet had torn through it back in Paris. That agency chick, Reyes, she dyed her hair, but I remember her face. She's here. A look of concern was now on his face as he shifted his stance. I let out a humorless chuckle in response to his statement and opened the door behind me. Brother, just trust me when I say that it's better for both of us if it stays in the dark for now. Smith tried to make a rebuttal, but I shut him down by closing the door and walking off. You'll find out soon enough, Smith. If they're here, then it's a big fucking problem. Man, you look like shit. I looked up to see the blonde-haired woman leaning against a Connex box with her arms crossed and a cigarette hanging loosely from her lips. Reyes, I mumbled, walking past her without stopping. I don't go by that anymore. It's Elizabeth now. She walked in step behind me as I headed towards the plywood structures that acted as the showers within the compound. I stopped and spun around, coming face to face with the agency's book. I thought we had an agreement. I fought to control my growing anger as one of the SAS guys walked past us with a foam tray in his hands. We still do, Jason. Why do you think you're here? She answered coolly as she stubbed out her cigarette with the heel of her boot. I grunted and continued towards the showers without speaking as the second set of footsteps still followed from behind. Is there anything else I should know that we missed back in Virginia? I asked without looking back. Yeah, your HVT is like you, Elizabeth answered as I stopped at the blue privacy curtain made from a long strip of tarp. What do you mean, training or? I asked, turning back around. I mean, he managed to use the sample, Jason. She answered through gritted teeth. That's why we couldn't recover it and eliminate him. Well, that explains why they missed him after the deal. Do me a favor and bring his ass back here after you put a bullet in his head. We have very important individuals that really want that body. She smirked as I stepped inside the warm interior of the cramped shower space. And one more thing. What? I asked, annoyed, while holding the open curtain with my free hand. Don't get shot in the face. Those individuals want to speak with you when you get back. The agency woman turned on her heel and walked off without saying another word as I tried to process what the hell just happened. Joint Task Force Compound, 0030 hours, local time. I thought we had helicopters. Why aren't we landing on the X and snatching this guy out of bed quick and clean? David smirked as he fiddled with the NVGs mounted to his helmet as we crossed the courtyard towards the waiting column of up-armored forerunners and modified helixes at the gate. Times have changed, brother, especially with all this virus shit going around, I answered while looking over my rifle and kit one last time. Hell, I just hope all that time sitting behind a desk and watching from the sidelines hasn't dulled your ability to kick doors in, Dave. I cracked a smile while holding out a closed fist in his direction. Besides, I'd hate to tell those green team boys that their favorite instructor got bested by a redneck from Texas. Say when. David grinned and slammed my fist with his in return. As Brock made his way to the middle of a growing group, checking on each man as he went by. Nighttime's burning, gents. Let's get our men and get back home. Captain Miller spoke next, as he tapped the hood of the lead vehicle with an open palm. Amen to that, a faceless voice called out from somewhere in the darkness. Brock looked back towards me and let his rifle fall in its sling as he fastened the chin strap of his helmet. We all come home tonight. I gave him a simple nod and stepped up to the second vehicle in the column with Smith and Hicks, who looked all too eager to get into the action. After the final confirmation, the column of vehicles slowly started to depart from the compound as the rest of the men and women on the base went about their nightly duties as we rolled to the main gate.
Radar Actual, this is Reaper 1-4. Your route is clear for the next 5 clicks. Over.
The drone operator's voice buzzed in my headset as Smith turned our vehicle onto the main route that would take us to our destination.
Copy 1-4. Keep us posted. Radar Actual out.
There was a brief delay followed by a short burst of static.
All call signs. Close the gap. And keep your fingers on the trigger. We're in Indian territory now, gents.
A wide grin spread across Smith's bearded face as he tilted his head up to see under the NVGs mounted to his helmet. We're on the highway to hell. His statement wasn't far from the truth. The hellish picture painted in front of us was like a scene out of a movie. Multiple fires backlit the city in a hellish blood-red glow, accompanied by the chatter of gunfire and thunderous booms from the various explosions that flashed in the air thick with smoke.
Reminds me of 03.
Hicks spoke up from the headset.
03? You're looking way too young to have been there.
I spun around to see the kid checking over his kit as Smith swerved around the body in the street.
Kid, do me a favor and just do your job. There's nothing you can do to wow us here.
A look of irritation appeared on the man's green glowing eyes as he snapped his NVGs up.
I'm not trying to impress anyone. I have a standard to uphold.
The drive continued in silence as Smith followed the lead vehicle. Your time's up, El Bahim. Outside the wire, 0128, local time.
Raider 2, how's it looking back there?
Brock's voice pulled me back into the vehicle as I scanned the streets for any threats that could be lurking within the shadowy windows and alleyways. After feeling satisfied with my sweep, I keyed the PTT button and glanced out the window to my right, spotting a man and a woman as they entered a local shop filled with more people inside.
Clear as mud, 1. Check. Keep your eyes peeled for any unwanted guests. 1 out.
The comms chatter soon died down after the lead vehicle took a sharp right, followed by another left, as we snaked through the growing cityscape that seemed to grow denser and more crowded with each passing second, as a distant gunfight echoed through the streets. It was only a matter of time now before we reached our target building.
All call signs stand by.
The lead vehicle began to slow down as we came to a deserted intersection after a few more minutes of weaving through the busy streets.
Target building is on the right. All teams go.
I flipped down my NVGs and joined the stack at the front door of the target building as the rest of the team pulled security. Brock signaled with his hand for a breacher and stepped back as one of the SAS operators swung a sledgehammer into the weak point of the wooden door. It, to no surprise, flew inward in a shower of splinters with a thunderous crack as Brock cleared the fatal tunnel with Smith, Miller, Hicks, and David following close behind. There was a muffled cry as the faint sounds of their suppressed rifles bled out onto the street as I cleared the ruined door with my rifle at the ready.
Squirter from the northeast.
The call-out was met with the sound of suppressed shots from outside.
X-ray down.
A British voice responded as I stepped over a dead man that was sprawled out over a broken hookah in the middle of the decorated living room. David set up security on a stairwell leading up to the second deck, as Miller and Hicks cleared the kitchen area to the left, as Smith and Brock cleared a small hallway leading off to the right.
Raider 2 and 5 are moving to the second deck.
I squeezed David's shoulder as we advanced up the stairs in unison with our rifles raised. As more movement became audible, as we rounded a sharp corner on our right, David's rifle burped 3 times, followed by a dull thud, as a man in white boxers matching Unto's description tumbled down the stairs towards us. I gritted my teeth, quickly stepping over the body, before putting 2 security shots into it, before continuing up the stairwell behind David. After squeezing his shoulder once more, David broke out to the right side of the clearing at the top of the stairwell, firing 2 more shots, as I took the left. There was a door that was cracked open a few inches, as I cleared a small open closet space closest to me. The cracked door flew inwards with ease after putting a boot into it. Inside the small furnished room stood El Bahim, who had a woman wrapped in his arms in a bear hug, as she struggled to get free while sobbing and yelling between deep breaths.
"Stay back! She's going to do it!"
He yelled in accented English. As the woman yelled something back in Arabic that I couldn't understand, a look of fear washed over the man's face as he struggled to keep a grip on the hysterical woman. As she rolled her shoulders hard, she managed to get her right arm free and lifted it into the air, with something clutched inside her hand. Shit.
"Senior Chief?"
A muffled voice called out over the sudden deafening ringing noise in my ears, as I attempted to open my eyes, only to get a searing sharp pain that radiated all throughout my face in response, as distorted voices continued to speak all around me, like a record being spun way too slow.
"Jason?"
A different voice spoke next, as I finally managed to peel one eye open, to see a fiery hellscape in front of my face, as shadowy figures danced around in the corners of my ruined vision. "Son of a bitch martyred himself and the woman," a British voice spoke next, as a pair of hands hooked onto my legs and arms. "The whole bloody place is burning down." There was a scuffle of boots, followed by a single shot from someone's rifle.
"Master Chief,
Get some of your men to start SSE, while we clear the rest of the building." "Check," Brock's distorted voice answered, as the familiar sounds of gunfire started to echo through the halls. I attempted to speak, but only a low groan escaped from my lips.
8, 6,
"I need you to start SSE. We have 1 friendly wounded coming out." Very slowly, my vision began to return to normal, as a blinding light began to hover from left to right in slow motion.
"Senior Chief, can you hear me?"
An unseen voice asked.
"Yes,"
I responded, sounding drunk.
"Good. Can you tell me where we are?"
The voice asked next, as something warm and wet trickled down my burning face.
Africa?"
I answered, while swatting at whatever was trickling down my face.
"Do you know what happened?"
The voice asked, as things started to come into focus, and the world around me brightened up in a fiery yellow and orange glow. "I got blown the fuck up," I answered clearly this time, as the front of the target building came into perfect view. A large chunk of the structure was missing on the back right side, and a fire was beginning to spread throughout the second deck and rooftop, as operators began to file out from the main entrance with mesh bags full of documents and other useful intel items. "You're a little banged up, but you'll live." The 18 Delta combat medic reached over and handed my rifle over before shifting his stance towards the south. "Your radio and NVGs got cooked. Brock wants us to mount up an RTB right now. ISR is showing multiple heatsinks closing in on us, and I don't feel like reenacting Black Hawk Down tonight." "Check," I grunted, while slowly getting into a kneeling position. There was a single crack, followed by a stifled curse, as the medic suddenly fell to the ground. Somewhere out in the darkness, someone had fired a single shot that had missed me by a few meters, but ended up hitting the medic in the leg. "Where the fuck did that come from?" someone called out, as I pulled the wounded medic around to the other side of the armored vehicle. "That corner building, right across from the tea shop. Movement on the 3rd deck," another voice called out, as someone returned fire with the mounted M138 minigun on one of the trucks, with a satisfying "Whole neighborhood is up now," someone else called out, as the minigun let out a series of clicks as it spooled down. I knelt down and tore the tourniquet off of the medic's kit and quickly fastened it in place above the growing dark spot on his inner thigh.
"Son of a bitch,"
he grunted and gritted his teeth, as I placed him down behind the engine block before checking over him once more. I think it went through and through. I don't see any bone fragments or arterial bleeding. I tapped his helmet with a grin and shifted positions to the back of the vehicle, spotting Brock and the rest of the entry team sneaking their way towards us as everything fell silent. It's the calm before the frigging storm. A single tracer round zipped out from one of the surrounding buildings and slammed into the streetlights inches away from me, causing a shower of sparks and glass to rain down on top of me. Asshole. Seemingly out of nowhere, a firefight blossomed in front of my eyes as Brock and the rest of the entry team made it to the third vehicle in our column, while the rest of the team collapsed in around the remaining vehicles while returning fire at our unseen attackers. I gritted my teeth and popped open the back door of my vehicle as rounds peppered the bulletproof glass and ballistic door panels that were facing the street. "Shane, Jason, get your asses in!" someone yelled from inside the vehicle as I snapped my head towards the medic to see that he had hoisted himself inside the cab with a loud curse as a stray round smacked into the door that I had opened just seconds earlier. "Get in, Jason!" the medic yelled as the vehicle started to roll forward. In the fiery exchange of gunfire, a man exited out into the glowing streets, toting an AK-47 while yelling something before pointing it in our direction. I centered the red dot of the holographic sight on the man's chest and pulled the trigger 3 times in return. "We all come home tonight." The man collapsed in the street, clutching his chest as I slid in the backseat while 3 other operators rolled into the bed of the truck. "Go, go, go!" one of them shouted while pounding the roof as the vehicles with mounted guns chewed up the surrounding buildings with a deafening roar.
1-8, we're moving.
The stone-faced operator in the driver's seat called out our movement as he looked over to the medic. "You good, Shane?" "Solid," the medic barked back as the radio inside the vehicle suddenly screeched to life. "Don't Stop Believing" blared from the speakers as we ran over a body lying in the street as the rest of the column began to trail behind us. "Kurt, your damn phone is still connected to the fucking stereo," the other operator seated next to me yelled out as an RPG streaked out from one of the buildings to our left. Every fiber of my being tensed as the RPG narrowly missed the front of our vehicle and smacked into a storefront on our right, sending bits of shrapnel and concrete into the already spiderwebbed windows. "Take a right, then another left," I ordered the driver, remembering the mental layout of our egress route as another RPG exploded inside of an alleyway to our left. I'm not dying to this damn song. Amidst all the chaos and guitar riffs, a shocking revelation sucked all the air from my lungs as Elizabeth's voice echoed in my mind. "Your HVT is like you." "We have to go back to the target building." I tapped the driver's shoulder and looked behind us to see the guys in the bed, trying to fight off the oncoming wave of bullets that pinged off of the bed of the truck. "The fuck we are! Our mission is done here," the driver barked back as he turned us onto a side street that was packed with more bodies that littered the ground. We screeched to a halt as a small group of people emerged from one of the buildings. They were covered head to toe with blood. Some even had life-threatening injuries, but seemed to ignore them completely as they ran towards us.
8-1, what's the hold-up?
"What the hell?" The driver snapped out of his daze and stepped on the accelerator. "We have civilians in the streets, 1. As they got closer, I could see that a black liquid was pouring from their eyes and ears as the first one in the group slammed into the hood of our vehicle with a sick, wet crunch after letting out a bloody scream. They were just like those people in the bunker back in Afghanistan. Joint Task Force Compound. Time unknown. After what felt like an eternity, our column of bullet-riddled vehicles slowly limped their way through the main gate of the compound as the support staff ran around collecting those that were wounded on the right back. This was going to be a very long start to a very short day. "What happened out there?" our skipper asked as he emerged from the talk with a sat phone in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "The primary objective was secured, and the secondary objectives were completed with minimal friendly casualties, sir," Brock answered as he unslung his rifle and pushed past Hicks. "Who has it?" I asked, spotting a very familiar-looking man with 2 full-sleeve tattoos who was wearing a Pink Floyd shirt off by the main gate along with 3 others. "Odin," Brock finally answered after a beat, hiking his thumb over at the shorter, Viking-esque operator, holding a metallic, cylindrical case under one arm and an MK-46 Mot 1 light machine gun under the other. Odin, being the Viking warrior that he is, walked over to us with a blood-stained grin until two men in black suits stopped him in his tracks. "We'll take it from here, sir." One of the suits attempted to grab the case, only to have Odin hold it in place awkwardly.
Sir?
Odin stood in place, waiting for the call. Our skipper gave him a single nod, and he released the case without hesitation.
Jason, need you to hang back after the after-action report.
The stone-cold look on his face spoke volumes as he looked over the team.
You too, Master Chief.
He glanced over at Brock once, before disappearing into the massive group. The small room within the T-skiff was dead quiet now that all the others had left. There were no jokes or wise-ass remarks from either of us as the skipper walked in circles at the front of the small plastic folding table we were seated at. Things were about to change regardless of our input. You two are being augmented into a small joint task force at the request of those above my pay grade. Our skipper finally spoke as he ran a hand through his grey short-cropped hair while walking over to our side of the table. His whole demeanor was serious and calm in contrast to Brock's infectious go-time energy. And with that being said, you two will be briefed in depth by a liaison from the agency back stateside in the following days. David will handle the team and recruitment process until your return. I'll keep you guys in the loop if I find out anything else. The room fell silent once more as Brock looked up at the seasoned officer with a grim expression plastered on his face.
I have a bad feeling about this, sir.
The man, who I had faced death alongside countless times over the past 2 decades, suddenly sounded worried. I don't like this any more than you do, Brock, but this is out of my hands. Keep your heads on straight and try to come back in one piece, yeah? The skipper responded tight-lipped as the 2 suits from earlier stepped into the room, uninvited, with folders in hand. He in return dismissed us with a simple nod, and we let ourselves out without saying anything else. I'll meet you at the pit. There are some things you need to know before our flight back home. Brock spoke in a whisper, referring to the smoking area as we departed from the T-skiff and into the cool night air. Jack, stay sharp, brother, I warned in response, before breaking off towards my housing unit on the other side of the compound. What was that all about? Smith asked as he emerged from a chew with a bottle of water in hand.
What?
I asked, stepping past him and securing my rifle and sidearm in their respected cases before taking a seat on my rack. After the AAR, what did the skipper want? He pressed as I rolled my stiff shoulders. A splitting headache began to form at the center of my skull and seemed to worm its way down my spine and extremities. He wanted to go over the op details. I answered simply, before standing back up and walking back towards the door.
Right.
Smith drug out his answer and smirked as he packed his gear. See you on the bird. Did you forget our little deal? Or were you wanting to add another tally to the kill board? A familiar female voice hissed as a figure emerged from the darkened corner of one of the chews off to my left. My mind scrambled for an answer that didn't involve a flurry of curses or lies. Fucked up. Trust me, I know, Jason. This is a very big fucking deal that you screwed up here. Elizabeth cursed while attempting to light a bloody cigarette stuck between her lips. No worries though, we picked up the slack this time. She planted her index finger into my chest as the small orange glow from the cherry flickered to life. There was a cut running up her left eyebrow that had been bandaged, and she wasn't wearing her typical agency getup anymore. She wore a black combat uniform and a helmet mounted with NVGs that was clipped to a dirty and worn plate carrier, along with a rifle similar to my own that was slung by her side as a gust of wind picked up loose dirt and sand in the air around us. Easy there, Annie Oakley. He had his bells rung by a frigging explosion. A smart-ass voice joined in next as I continued walking. Keith. I stopped and faced the man who was dressing in similar attire and equipment. How are you feeling, killer? The bored-looking man smirked as he glanced over at Elizabeth, then back over to me. I'm solid, Keith, I answered. looking down at my AOR 1 camouflage combat shirt and pants to see that they were smudged with soot and dried blood. Shit, I need to change. I go by James now, he shot back with a wink. I forget that these agency types change names like a look, if you two are done flirting, we're wheels up in 15. Don't screw up again. Elizabeth shoved past us, sounding more pissed off than usual, as a trail of cigarette smoke followed behind her. You have some serious explaining to do, Jason. I'll catch you on the flip side, bro. I have to make sure she doesn't kill anyone. James tapped my shoulder and slipped past me with a quiet chuckle as he caught up with his other half that stormed off towards the front gate. What took you so long? Brock spoke as he looked up from the smartphone in his hands. Had a run-in with some old friends, I answered. Did they try anything? He asked, sliding the phone into the cargo pocket of his combat pants. I just shook my head no and let out a sigh in response. Look, I talked with a buddy of mine over in B Squadron. According to him, there are isolated riots breaking out all over the globe. He paused and looked around the pit. And? I shrugged in response, as he held up an open hand in frustration. And it's similar to what's going on here. Most of them are in hotspots that we've operated within in the past year. And on top of that, he trailed on as my headache flared and sent a spike of pain through my skull that almost made me double over. People are going crazy and eating each other. It's not right. Brock's baritone voice brought me back to the present as he paced around in a small circle. I'm starting to feel like we're covering up someone's mistakes, and sooner or later they're going to tie up the loose ends. He finally stopped walking and rested his hand on his hip as 3 men dressed in civilian-looking clothing walked through the gated entrance of the pit. Look, whatever this shit is, we can deal with it. I need to make a phone call. I gave Brock's shoulder a reassuring squeeze and headed towards a more private area to make my one and only phone call home. The office. A few days later, after changing into some appropriate work attire, after running shooting drills with the team and new guy, I found myself inside of a regular-looking annex office building on the company grounds. We passed through several corridors and security checkpoints that would make Fort Knox look like a joke, as our spooky friends escorted us to the meeting room. Utah, Oxide, this is Brock and Jason. Both of them are shooters, so they know the drill. Elizabeth spoke with 2 men who stood by the door as we took our seats at the massive conference table inside the plain-looking office room. Langley's quality 5-star accommodations. I mumbled to Brock and shook my head while studying our new teammates as they made themselves comfortable. The man Elizabeth had called Utah was a little taller than me and had that typical merc look, accompanied by a bushy graying mountain man beard. Definitely a hitter. Utah regarded the 2 of us with an inquisitive glance before looking up towards the woman at the head of the table. Who is on the chopping block today? The one she had called Oxide looked years younger than all of us, but gave off some serious Iceman vibes as he sipped from the jet black tumbler in his hand. My money is on cleanup. He joined in as he closed the blinds on the large windows lining the wall, darkening the room from the lights from out in the hallway and shutting out any prying eyes that wandered by. Elizabeth smirked, then referenced a massive map being projected onto a whiteboard behind her. The area she circled happened to be a current hotspot in South America. Our objective is to locate and destroy a research lab within a small fortified bunker located here. Oxide did a small fist bump as a satellite photo appeared next. The structure that the lab is currently located in is an old glass factory that is being occupied by a local cartel outfit that is using it to manufacture and distribute narcotics. According to Hume Int and Sick Int, they have yet to find the bunker, but are planning on moving their operations elsewhere, which gives us a small window to do what we need. She paused and gauged the room for a moment before speaking again. Now, enemy numbers vary from 6 to 15, not counting civilians and the distributors that are picking up shipments. On top of that, local assets will be assisting us on this takedown, so watch your fire. Any questions so far? The room remained silent, and she continued on without missing a beat. After going over our infiltration route and contingency plans, We were led to a small armory filled with a variety of gear and weaponry from various manufacturers. This was something that I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of times in the past, in the teams, but the feeling was still a good one. Thank you, the American taxpayer. I know walking book deals when I see them. Utah spoke with a grin as he grabbed the black gear back from one of the large metal lockers that had been secured shut with a series of magnetic and biometric locks. Don't mind him, guys. He's just jealous that you can read and write. Look, everything here is paid for by Uncle Sam. So, go crazy. James joined in as he fiddled with a micro-drone that he had called Dragonfly and a tablet that controlled it. Don't break that, or it's your ass. Elizabeth gave James a death glare and retrieved a large rifle case and clothing from a locker similar to the others, with the exception of a photo of a little girl with a white, toothy smile who was holding a small puppy in her hands. Maybe she is human after all. Got enough demo here to level a condo. Hopefully it does the trick. Those blueprints are at least 3 decades old. Oxide grimaced and looked up at me. If a moth so much as farts, it is goodnight Oxide and 6 city blocks. He created an explosion gesture with his right hand, while checking over some explosive charges and a spool of dead cord. Alright, once you have everything you need, we'll be out in the hall. Elizabeth gave me a thumbs up as I looked over the different gear in the armory, as Brock looked over his communications equipment and lightweight chest rig that housed 8 magazines. After spending a few more minutes collecting my gear, I was abruptly stopped by Elizabeth, who trailed behind the group as we traversed down an empty corridor. Hey, someone needs to speak with you before we take off. She looked conflicted for a brief moment before her expression took on the all too familiar pissed off one that was always plastered on it. Am I in trouble? I asked, trying to figure out what was about to happen as we arrived at a set of metal double doors. Not to my knowledge. They just want to do a quick physical evaluation, she answered simply. My skin crawled at the statement as she swiped the card against the black panel on the wall. I think this has more to do with your operational experience and your previous injuries. Elizabeth tried to find the right words as she stopped at the threshold of the double doors we passed through. She opened her mouth to speak again, but stopped as a group of men in white lab coats emerged from a side door to our right. 4 armed guards dressed in black uniforms appeared behind them and stood on both sides of the hall with their rifles held against their chests. Sir, come with us, please. One of the lab coats gestured down another corridor to our right. After a few minutes of walking in awkward silence, I was led to a room that looked like any other you'd see inside of a hospital or small healthcare clinic. A large bed sat against the wall near the center of the room, along with medical devices and equipment that flanked both sides of it, along with a privacy curtain. Go ahead and take a seat. The doctor will be in shortly. One of the men spoke up as the others watched from the hallway. Great. Next, they're gonna be stealing my liver and prodding my ass with needles. I trailed on under my breath while taking a seat at the foot of the bed as one of the armed guards entered the room and stood by the entryway with his rifle at the low ready. After a few minutes of silence, I started making an escape plan, until an older man wearing a pair of wireframe glasses and a crisp white lab coat entered the room with a clipboard in hand. Hello, I'm Dr. Schmidt, head of research and development for the agency. He snapped himself and extended out an open hand in my direction, only to have it stay there with no response from me. You must be Jason. I've heard so much about you. He looked me up and down once, before walking over to a metal instrument tray and receiving an empty syringe that lay next to some surgical tools of some sort. Most of your operational records are redacted and classified, so I won't ask any questions in that regard, but I do have a few that I need to be answered. He gestured towards my arm next. I'm just going to take a blood sample, is that okay? He asked as I scanned the room for any potential weapons and means of escape once again. What for? I finally asked while rolling up the sleeve of my shirt. For some testing. Now, have you experienced any visual or auditory hallucinations in the past few weeks? He asked as he took a seat in a small rolling chair across from me. No, I've had some very painful headaches here recently, but... I stopped mid-sentence and eyed the doctor, who was now scribbling things down on the clipboard. Other than that, there's been nothing, sir. Interesting, he responded, looking up from the notepad. And have you noticed anything strange in regards to any personal injuries? He asked next as his hand went to the syringe. I don't understand. What do you mean? Without warning, the doctor jabbed the needle deep into my right arm and pulled the plunger back, causing blood to fill the tube in a matter of seconds as I let out a string of curses. What the hell? I ripped my arm away from the so-called doctor and stood up, only to have the guard level his rifle at my chest. Don't move, the guard barked as the doctor looked at my arm. Remarkable. The doctor tried to hide a smile as he stored the blood sample and stood up from the chair. I glanced down to see that the bleeding had stopped and the small injection site had already healed over. I'll be in touch as more information is developed in regards to your situation, but in the meantime, please take these. He handed over an unmarked bottle of pills. They will help the headaches. Make sure to take one, but only if the headaches get worse. And if anything changes, please inform someone on the team. You're a valuable asset to us, Jason. I was dismissed with a wave and was escorted back into the main hall by the armed guards. As we traversed down the corridor, we passed a padded room that had been destroyed. Inside were empty brass casings that littered the floor along with blood splatters that was smeared on the white walls and ceiling. Something or someone had gotten out or died trying. Eyes forward. One of the guards jabbed the barrel of their rifle into the small of my back, sending a wave of pain shooting up my spine. South America, 15:39 hours, local time. Brock leaned his seat back and craned his neck to see if the two men we had been tailing had stopped walking. The two men in question had stopped right in front of the not-so-abandoned glass factory that was supposedly housing the bunker.
Leviathan 1 and 2, stand by for contact.
Elizabeth's voice chirped in my earpiece as my finger tapped on the trigger guard of the modified HK-416 in my hands. As the seconds ticked by, a splitting headache began once again as I fought the urge to take a handful of those pills that Schmidt had given me. I balled my left hand into a fist and glanced to our right, spotting the white SUV across the street that housed James, Oxide, and Utah as they scanned the area. Looks like we're in for a long one, I spoke aloud while scanning our surroundings as Brock tapped a beat on the steering wheel with his index fingers. Are you feeling alright? You look like hell. Brock gave me a sideways glance as he adjusted his 10-ball cap and small earpiece as the traffic picked up. I'm solid, I responded through clenched teeth as two men on a dirt bike wove through the busy traffic like a fish swimming upstream, before making a sharp turn towards James's vehicle. Shit. The man on the back of the bike suddenly raised a compact machine gun, but before he was able to pull the trigger, the side windows of the SUV exploded outwards and the two men were cut down in a brief and violent shootout. The two men hit the ground and the three agency spooks spilled out from the SUV and pushed across the street towards the factory with their weapons raised as the civilians that crowded the sidewalks scattered like panicked animals.
Mother, we're on the move. Leviathan, pull security.
James ordered as Brock punched the accelerator and parked us up on the curb right outside of the side entrance of the factory. On it, Brock answered with the winds as he stepped out of the car and took cover behind one of the massive circular support pillars beside us. I followed his lead and watched our left flank as gunfire erupted from further inside the structure as the rest of the team began their assault.
Bunker entrance found. Going internal.
Utah's voice called out over comms as a red minivan screeched to a stop across the street from us. Who the hell are these guys?
Leviathan, those are tangos in the van. Waste them.
Elizabeth updated while watching over us from her sniper height. I steadied my rifle on the corner of the pillar with my thumb and watched as the windshield of the minivan spiderweb from the three tiny holes that landed on the driver's side. There was a brief commotion from inside and the van suddenly spat forward as the sliding door on the driver's side opened. Two men decided to bail out just before the van careened into a row of parked cars on the corner of the street as more rounds impacted the windshield, causing a spray of blood to shower the glass and interior. I steadied my aim and hovered the red dot of my sight on one of the men who bailed as he struggled to get up to his feet with an AK-47 in hand. My rifle barked 3 times and the man fell back down in the street, clutching at his chest. As I snapped over to my next target, The red dot landed on a second man who was running towards another parked car adjacent to the now smoking van. As the echoes of gunfire rang through the crowded streets, I inhaled slowly and fired a controlled burst in the running man's direction and managed to clip his leg, causing him to fall halfway to his destination as 3 other shooters emerged from the other side of the minivan with weapons at the ready. They wasted no time returning fire, instantly causing chunks of cement, brick, and dust particles to explode from the pillar as I ducked behind cover. Amidst the chaos, I could hear what sounded like a mix of Russian and Portuguese being yelled in the distance as I changed magazines.
Demo is set. Starting exfil now.
Oxide called out over the roaring gunfight as I rotated around to the opposite side of the large pillar in an attempt to get an angle on the 3 men who were shooting at us. I slowly pied the corner and spotted 1 man at the back of our car. I exhaled and rested the red dot over his chest and pulled the trigger twice, dropping him as another shooter got cut down while dragging his wounded companion back across the street. Moving, a cool voice called out beside me, followed by a tap on my shoulder as James suddenly pushed out past me and towards our vehicle while firing. Got you covered. Move. Another calm voice called out from directly behind me as the rest of the team pushed out into the cramped street. Moving, I called out next as I broke from cover. The 10-meter dash felt like a mile as I finally reached the back of our sedan. When I moved around to the side of the sedan, I spotted the now dying man who I had shot, trying to grab an AK-47 that was just out of his reach. I tilted my rifle and 2 security shots into him as the rest of the team reached the SUV.
Go, get us out of here,
Brock ordered as he pulled the passenger side door shut with a loud thunk. In the distance, police sirens began to wail and civilians were starting to emerge from their homes and businesses that surrounded us as the screams from the wounded caught in the crossfire filled the air.
It's right there. Stop,
Brock blurted out, and I slammed on the brakes in response, causing the tires to squeal in protest after driving through the claustrophobic streets for what felt like hours. I let out a slow breath and looked off to my right to be greeted by the sight of Elizabeth, who had her blonde hair tied up in a short ponytail, as she jogged over to us from an alleyway with her SR-25 marksman rifle slung across her chest and a tablet in hand.
Hit it.
She tapped the back of my headrest and messed with the tablet. The dragonfly showed 4 vehicles trailing you guys after the building went up. She glanced behind us at the large plume of black smoke that curled up into the air that was thick with a white haze.
Have the guys set up an ambush,
Brock suggested as he swapped out his spent magazine for a new one.
We can just end these assholes and be out of here with no issue,
he continued, slapping the bolt release as I fought to keep the sedan on the pothole-stricken road. Sounds like a plan. Hell, we might be able to take one of them alive. Elizabeth put the tablet down and relayed the message to the others as 4 vehicles filled the rearview mirror. As I turned onto a small side street, there was a flash from behind us and the back window shattered, sending shards of glass into the backseat and floorboards, causing Elizabeth to curse loudly.
Brock, they're shooting at us.
I gritted my teeth and hunkered down while turning us onto another street that would lead us to the waiting ambush as the churning of metal, dull echoes of gunfire chased after us.
No shit,
Brock growled back as he leaned out of the window and returned fire with a few shots that caused our attackers to slow down for a brief moment. I spotted the white SUV and pulled the car up to its bumper before stepping out and sliding over the hood and taking up positions behind the engine block. When I looked back up, the 4 vehicles had spilled out onto the street before being lit up by a barrage of bullets. It was a turkey shoot. The vehicles in the back of the group slammed into the one in front of it as the lead vehicle screeched to a sudden halt. These men, whoever they were, attempted to disembark and were promptly cut down. Amidst the chaos, a mob had suddenly formed around their vehicles as Elizabeth called a ceasefire.
Civilians are in the mix. Hold your fire.
I watched in horror as one of the men who had been shot in the leg and dropped in the street got torn apart by the growing mob surrounding them.
I don't think those are...
I looked over the group through the G45 magnifier as the smell of blood and death hit my nostrils. My suspicions were confirmed when one of the people in the mob broke off and ran towards us in a dead sprint, completely ignoring their missing left arm and exposed intestines.
Stop! Parar!
I yelled in Portuguese, followed by Spanish with no success. As the person closed the distance, I noticed that they were bleeding from the ears, nose, and eyes. "Shit is spreading fast, Liz," James spoke as he took aim with his rifle and fired off one shot. The person's head snapped back, and they dropped like a puppet who had its strings cut. "Torch the car and get in with us," he ordered while rounding to the back of the SUV. "Where the hell are we going now?" I asked while jumping in the cargo compartment in the back next to Brock as the screaming from the mob began to fill the air around us. "To the plane. Our job here is done. We're getting out of here before the city goes into lockdown," Elizabeth answered simply as the tiny dragonfly drone landed in her palm. "We gotta go." James pounded the side of the door as Utah and Oxide stepped away from the sedan that was engulfed in flames. "Raj, let's move." Location unknown. Time unknown. "Hey, wake up. You need to see this." A distant voice pulled me from my ambient-fueled nap as a hard tap on my foot grew more repetitive with each passing second. What is it?" I mumbled, swinging my feet off the orange netted seats that lined the hull of the C-130. The shadowy figure at my feet took a seat beside me and held out a phone that nearly blinded me for a moment. On the blurry screen was a video with the title, "The End." I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes, and there was a sudden transition screen, and the face that appeared next made my blood run cold. The man was Tolman, the asshole who had started all of this.
"It is time, my brothers and sisters."
The man spoke in fluent Arabic and Farsi as propaganda videos played behind him. "How the hell did he?" I was cut off by Elizabeth as she paused the video. He was jumped from a guarded transport when they were transferring him to a more secure site closer to the States. She spoke as the plane hit a rough bout of turbulence, causing the entire aircraft to shudder violently before smoothing out. "Any idea where he was taken to?" I asked over the deafening hum of the engines. She nodded in response. "We put 2 trackers in him. One was subthermal and was cut out, and the other was placed in, let's just say, it is still active as of 8 hours ago." She paused and looked over towards the other 3 men who were sleeping or cleaning their weapons and gear. The last location that it was picked up was in Ukraine. My head started to hurt at the thought of conducting any kind of operation in that geopolitical minefield. According to the geo data, he has been stationary in Chernobyl for the past 2 days. She looked back towards me, and then back to the phone after a beat. Tolman was now ranting about a holy war, and a video of burning streets now filled the screen next. "Are we going to get him?" I asked, peeling my eyes off the small screen and locking them with Elizabeth's. "I'm working on it, but it looks like my boss is going to pull the plug on us," she answered begrudgingly, and looked away before pocketing the phone before fishing around in the cargo pocket of her pants and retrieving a crumpled pack of cigarettes. "Jason, if they don't give us the green light, are you willing to go off the reservation in order to make things right?" She frowned when the pack turned out to be empty. The question caught me off guard, and I found myself scrambling for an answer as Brock walked over in our direction. "I'll do whatever it takes." Somewhere hot and humid. They moved like specters under the cover of darkness. None of them spoke. They didn't have to. Each of them knew their jobs down to the smallest detail and were focused on the mission at hand. The man at the front of the 8-man group came up to a closed door and signaled for a breacher as he covered the door with a raised rifle. A man in the middle of the group approached the door and placed a long strip charge up and down on the seam, then stepped back around the corner where the rest of the group waited. 3, 2, 1, execute. A loud explosion shook the entire structure and rippled through the hallway, sending splinters of wood and sparks everywhere as the door that had once blocked their advance now lay on the ground in the next room. 2 men surged through the swirling smoke and embers to be greeted by the sounds of gunfire and screaming. In the far right corner of the room, near an open window, stood a boy no older than 15, holding a rifle. Next to him, a man wearing a mask holding a pipe bomb. The threats were eliminated, and the men exited the room and moved down to the next, slowly and methodically, like a well-rehearsed dance. As they moved, the group split and took control of the other rooms in pairs of 2, until one group came face to face with a man who had no weapons.
Hands! Let me see your hands!
The older and more experienced of the 2 men yelled, as their target kept their hands at their side.
Do it now!
He commanded.
Let me see your hands or you'll be shot!
The young man yelled in fluent Arabic, before the experienced one fired a few shots that dropped their target. There was a small pop, followed by a low hiss that filled the small furnished room in response.
And Dax!
An inhumanly loud voice boomed from nowhere. And, as if the voice of God himself commanded, everything and everyone stopped in an instant. The crying of women and screams of children had ceased, and the quiet curses and criticisms began. This isn't going to be good.
Lights!
Said the booming voice next, as the darkened interior of the suburban house was illuminated under a bright white light from above.
Lights, lights, lights! Index, index, index! Jesus H. Christ!
Switch it up and run it again, gentlemen.
That was unsatisfactory.
The steely voice of our skipper echoed from beside me as the both of us watched from our perch on the catwalk above the modular rooms that had been thrown together by the amazing men and women that operated the shoot house. Brock, who was now very pissed off, looked up from the smoky room with the not-so-dead man, who was now standing and brushing off the blue chalk dust from the simulation rounds. LB, the newest member on the team, just shook his head as Smith entered the room with his rifle hanging from its sling.
Vest?
Smith asked, only to get a glare from Brock as he exited the room without answering. The team has been doing great, but has had some minor setbacks since you've been sidelined. When did the doc say you could come back? The skipper lowered his voice as he leaned against the guardrail. I leaned on the railing with arms crossed and sighed while trying to word the sudden life-changing diagnosis. The once sporadic headaches had become constant and even debilitating after returning from South America with Brock. And with no way to contact my agency friends, I continued to suffer from these wicked headaches that seemed to get worse with each passing day. Anywhere between 4 to 6 more months, sir. I finally answered begrudgingly. He nodded with a stoic look on his face as the people beneath us switched up the interiors and rooms at a lightning speed, with amazing attention to detail like adding family photos, posters to the walls, and other homely items. It creeped me out a little how these people could create fake homes that seem so real. It just blew my simple Texan mind. The guys have told me you weren't answering their phone calls. Is there something I should know about? He asked as the men made their way back to the staging area. No, sir. I lied. I see. Well, keep me in the loop. If you need anything, you just give me a call, okay? The officer gave me a nod and straightened up as one of the staff members below gave him a quick thumbs up before exiting the newly established house. The skipper grabbed a small headset and slipped it on with ease, then smiled and, with an announcer's voice, said,
Shooters, stand by!
Another round on me. I shouted with a grin as the guys hooted and hollered inside of the crowded marina bar.
So I hear you go by Little Bear.
I patted the new guy on the back while nursing on my now lukewarm beer.
You don't seem so little, and sure as hell don't look like a bear.
The thin man just smiled and lifted his right arm with his beer still in hand. A massive feather tattoo stretched down his outer muscled forearm. I come from the Apache bloodline, and just like my ancestors before me, I will continue their warrior legacy. He smiled, then took a sip from his beer as Smith joined us at the bar. Things have been quiet and boring without your old salty ass, Jason. There's no, shut up, I'm trying to sleep, or I shit you not this one time anymore. He belched once and grabbed a fist full of chips from the bowl that the bartender had laid out just moments earlier. I'll have to pay the doc a visit and see if I can bribe him for an early discharge. Hell, we miss you, bro. I mean it. Smith smiled and downed the rest of his beer before locking eyes with a woman across the bar. Gonna go do some intel gathering. Wish me luck. Typical Smith. You put a few beers in him and he becomes a magnet for froghawks. The cheers and happy feelings were soon washed away from the angry sounds of buzzing. The call had gone out and the guys were no longer buzzed from the single round of beers they were able to enjoy on this rare night off. Next one's on me, brother. We'll talk soon. Brock, who now looked like a larger version of Magnum PI, gave me a wide smile and pulled me into a quick bear hug before joining the rest of the team as they filed out of the small marina bar and into the humid night air. The bartender, who must have been somewhere else, brought the next round of beers and set them in front of me with a look of pity as an upbeat song kicked on the jukebox. "Your buddies left in a real big hurry. Was it an emergency?" she asked as she walked back around to the other side of the bar. "Something like that," I responded while downing another beer. After finishing almost all the beers that had been laid out in front of me, someone decided to take the seat next to me and take the last one for themselves. "Hey!" I looked over to see a familiar face as my last beer was being downed. "Elizabeth. What brings you to the Sunshine State?" I put my beer down and crossed my arms on the bar top as the nice-looking bartender picked up my empty bottle and replaced it with another. "That'll be my last one." I handed the woman a 20 and gave her a nod. She smiled back with a wink as she tended to another patron. I decided to take a little vacation. I have a few months saved up. I figured it wouldn't hurt to get a little sun on my skin and sand between my toes before going back to work. The agency woman smirked. This was the first time I'd seen her without a cigarette. Things must be good. "Cheers to that." I tilted the neck of my bottle towards her and she clinked it with her bottle. "Why are you still in here and not with the guys?" She shifted her position on the bar stool and looked over at me with an inquisitive expression on her face. "I mean, you love blowing shit up and kicking in doors, so I take it that you're not here by choice." "It's my head," I finally answered after an awkward moment of silence. "It has been killing me ever since we returned from that little trip down south. I tried to get a hold of you, James, hell, even Utah and Oxide over the past few weeks, but no dice. Even my contacts in the agency couldn't even find you guys." I continued to sip on my beer as the woman's expression changed to a more serious one. "About that." She paused and looked over to the bartender with a credit card in hand. "I'll cover their tab." She placed the card down and smiled. "Let's talk somewhere more private. I'll fill you in on everything so far. Hey, I know a good burger joint just a few blocks down. I need to get some grease in me before anything else." I put another 20 down on the bar and walked out the door with the stranger. "So, this is what being a modern-day James Bond will get you, huh?" I whistled while walking into the massive living room adorned with paintings and an expensive floor rug and a clear coffee table that was next to a nice sectional couch that sat along the wall. "Perks of the trade," Elizabeth responded simply as she walked over to the balcony that had a perfect view of the ocean. "I mean, this place is way out of my price range, but kudos. You wouldn't happen to have any beer in the fridge, would you?" I asked with a mouth full of fries as she drew the curtains. Elizabeth rolled her eyes and walked towards the couch with a remote in hand. "Do I look like I drink beer on the regular? No, there's water in the fridge and aspirin in the top cabinet next to the stove." "I'm good. Thanks for the offer." I took a seat across from Elizabeth and ran a hand over my bearded face as she turned on the massive TV that was mounted to the wall across from us. Unlike the other guys on the team, I hated my beard. It itched and made me look like a homeless mountain man that had ended up in a rich neighborhood every time I tried to hang out with Brock and Smith, so I usually kept it shaved unless the mission requested it. She placed her head in her hands as her leg bounced up and down like a jackhammer running on jet fuel. "Look, I'm not officially with the agency. That's why you couldn't find me when you asked your people to poke around." Her words hung in the air like a thick fog as I leaned in close. "So, who exactly do you work for?" "I am part of an organization that is in all aspects of government and civilian life, both here and abroad. The police, military, and here recently, the private sector." She paused, no doubt contemplating what to say next. "I deal with... well, this is going to sound batshit crazy." "Try me," I responded, as the news broadcast on the TV rambled on about a new strain of some virus that was sweeping the globe. Demons, cryptids, cults, vampires, zombies, it's all real. And we deal with them on a daily basis without anyone knowing. Sometimes it's with the assistance of Tier 1 operators such as yourself, and others with local government agencies in order to keep a low profile. She stopped and looked up from her hands as I scrunched my brow. She's right. This is batshit crazy. When I let you and Brock take a peek behind the curtain, it brought some heat down on me and my guys. Hence the reason why I'm down here on vacation. She gestured around the room with an open hand, her leg now steady. Vacation, huh? I murmured while eating another fry. This answer got the TV remote thrown at me in response. Jesus, I just broke the seal on my career-ending secret, and all you can do is mumble, vacation, huh? And stuff your damn face? The sudden outburst made me fall silent for a split second, then bust out laughing. You're an asshole, you know that? Let this be the last time I tell you anything. Elizabeth was on her feet and furious now as I ate another fry while trying not to laugh while chewing. Look, I finally finished the fry after a slew of curses and put the empty bag down on the coffee table. There was no hint of joking now as I looked the woman in the eyes. My job, no, scratch that. My life is now coming to an end, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry you guys got reprimanded for letting two wise-ass door kickers see what you do in the shadows. Honestly, I could care less what goes on in your organization, because there's some asshole out there that wants to end the world, and I'm sitting on my ass right now playing Dr. Phil. What do you mean? She shot back as I got up to my feet. I mean that those frigging headaches that have been kicking my ass got me sidelined. I am no longer operationally fit, and according to the Navy doctors, my ass is fixing to be thrown out if they can't find out what is causing them. So, I'm sorry if I seem a little insensitive right now, darling, 'cause... A phone on the table that I hadn't noticed until now buzzed. An unknown caller ID popped up along with a restricted number. Are you gonna get that? I pointed to the phone as the woman held my gaze. Earth to 007, your phone is ringing. I waved a hand at her, only to get no response as the phone continued to ring. My real name is Elizabeth Rayner. I have a little sister named Emily over in Washington. She has been raising my daughter for the past 4 years. Look, I'm not the cold-hearted and ruthless bitch they all make me out to be, Jason. I'm just like you, Jason. I'm a mother, a sister. Her eyes swelled with tears now, as she fought to keep her voice from cracking. She wiped her wet eyes with the back of her hand, and picked up the phone and answered it without missing a beat. Sorry for the delay. Yes, of course. Look, I owe you big time, Sergey. Next time I am in the area, the drinks are on me, yeah? Sure thing. Stay safe out there. She spoke in fluent Russian, then hung up the phone. Looks like my vacation plan is taking me to another location. Wait, I tried to speak as the flood of new information swirled around inside my damaged head. I'm booking a flight to Ukraine. Are you coming with, or do you plan on drinking yourself into a coma while watching old housewives swoon over you? The all too familiar smart-ass remark caught me off guard as I still try to piece things together. Hey, Earth to Knuckle Dragger, are you in or not? I only have one shot to do this, and I'm doing it with or without you. Elizabeth was now seated beside me with an open laptop on her knees as she typed away furiously. I'm in, but I have to make a few phone calls, and... She looked up from the screen. Okay, do what you have to do. Our flight leaves at 06:30. I gave her a quick nod and pulled my phone from my back pocket and stepped into the other room. After making a few needed phone calls and checking in with my family, I found myself alone on Elizabeth's ocean view balcony. The lights from freighter ships and oil platforms dotted the inky blackness over the vast ocean. It reminded me of Texas and all those times my family would visit Galveston in the summer. But that was a lifetime ago. What was on my mind was the fact that Elizabeth had suddenly opened the floodgates and what we were about to do. We were going to kill Tolman or die trying. The sliding door opened, and Elizabeth stepped out onto the balcony with 2 duffel bags. I packed you some clothes. They should fit. And if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Once we're in the air, it's all being played close to the chest. Ukrainian logging camp. Samantha, welcome, my dear. Oh, how I've missed your beautiful face. It has been too long. The old man with wild white hair that poked out from underneath his grey ushanka spoke with a raspy voice in Ukrainian as he walked with a limp. The large Soviet-era logging truck he stepped out of shuddered and coughed out a black plume of smoke as the engine idled. Boris, how have you been? Are the grandchildren doing well? And did they receive my gift last month? She asked, pulling the man into a tight hug. The way the two interacted, you'd assume that they were related. But that wasn't the case, and despite my ambient-fueled sleep state that I was still trying to recover from, this was no doubt spy talk between two very respected and skilled intelligence operatives. They're doing well and really enjoyed the gift. Let's talk in the house, yes? The old man pointed towards a seemingly normal house as he squinted over at me with an inquisitive gaze. And who is this, my dear? Your husband? Why yes, where are my manners? This is Foster. She spoke in fluent Ukrainian while waving me over with a genuine smile. I walked over and extended an open hand to the old man, smiling back. Where are you from, my son? He asked with a smile and looked back to Elizabeth, his expression not changing one bit. What did he ask, honey? I asked my wife, with no attempt to hide my accent. Doing anything other would have been so blatantly obvious, he would have figured it out as soon as I opened my mouth. He asked, where are you from, my love? She answered with an accent accompanied by a small and heartfelt laugh. I faked a laugh and placed my hand on the old man's shoulder while shifting my stance. Behind them stood two men in civilian clothing that had emerged from the house. Both of them wore thick jackets that probably concealed machine guns. Tennessee, it's in America. I kept smiling while gauging the threats that continued to multiply with every passing second. All I had was a Glock that was resting in my Kydex holster on my flank, and one spare magazine along with an SOG folding knife clipped to my pocket. The odds were not in my favor. American? The man seemed surprised, before laughing a hearty. You have to teach me about baseball, yes? He chuckled and said something to Elizabeth and shrugged out of my grip. Shit. We're about to be shot to pieces. But that didn't happen. The old man just led the way towards the house and waved at the two men that had emerged. Both nodded in unison and said something into what I assumed were wireless microphones as they stepped to the side. Let me do the talking, or you'll get us both killed, Elizabeth hissed as she pulled down the black beanie over her ears as we approached the house. The small living room that once held family gatherings had been turned into an intelligence station. Computer monitors and small server banks hummed as a small portable heater clicked on in the corner of the room. Men and women dressed in similar clothing to the old man sat at their stations, while sipping from mugs of hot tea or coffee, while whispering to one another, while stealing glances over at their two new guests. 4. The old man coughed into a blue handkerchief violently before pulling it away from his mouth. A glistening red liquid strung from his lips until he tapped it away with the opposite side of the cloth. You'll only have 4 from my field team, and that is all. Consider my taps paid in full. That's all we need. Elizabeth nodded towards a large laminated map stuck to a corkboard. You've been disrupting their convoys? She asked while walking over to the marked up map that had Russian scribbling all over it. Yes, we couldn't risk any more samples getting out into the wild. If our enemies were to get their hands on. He stopped and stared directly at me. Your American friend. He's one of them. He pointed a shaking finger in my direction as I stood near the front door. Oh shit. What do you mean? Elizabeth asked, now looking back at me, then back to the old man. Your man, the one with the cloudy eye. We managed to intercept some of their radio transmissions. He spoke of a man that was damned to not live nor die by the hand of man nor God, only to suffer for all eternity. His statement wasn't far off, but the fact that I survived was simple luck, right? There's food in the kitchen over there, and the gear is down in the basement. The team will be back and ready by nightfall. If you have any questions, please come to me. I'll be here. The old man's raspy voice brought me back to the present as he shuffled into the kitchen. Let's get our things packed. Elizabeth was now standing near a blue door that led down into the basement. Ladies first. I held the door open and held out my arm towards the darkened basement. Rows of AK variants and sniper rifles along with belt-fed machine guns and rocket launchers filled the large open basement. Off in a side room beside the weapons sat rows of neatly organized uniforms and other equipment that had been separated inside cages. "Are you familiar with any of this?" Elizabeth asked while adjusting the sling of a modified AK-74U that was outfitted with a red dot sight and IR device that was mounted to a rail system that was much similar to the one on my HK back in the States. "Yeah, did some training with them in." I stopped myself and pulled back the charging handle of the heavily modified AK-105. "I like it." "I'll get you one for Christmas. Comms and other gear are over there." She pointed towards a large metal cabinet that sat on the left wall. "I'm sure they'll have everything set up and we'll get it sorted out when they get here." I walked over to the cage and pulled open the unlocked door to see a familiar set of night vision goggles that were mounted to a spray-painted combat helmet, along with a headset that was clipped to its rails. "Kill the lights, please." The 4 tubes stared back at me with a somber look as I picked them up. The lights inside the room went out, and we were bathed in familiar darkness. Now, this is cool. I looked around the room in the green-gray world of night vision to see Elizabeth's glowing eyes as she flipped me the bird with a smirk. "Where did he get this?" "I don't know, but I'm turning the lights back on." She flicked the switch just as I tilted the tubes up off of my eyes. "Are you ready?" "As I can be. Do you really think that he's there?" I asked while putting the helmet back into the cabinet. "According to my intel, he is," she mumbled while grabbing some fully loaded magazines from a rack in the other room. "No chances here. If you have the shot, take it." "Understood," was my only response as the shuffle of feet from upstairs caused the floorboards to groan under the shifting weight. It must have been our 4 shooters, because the amount of swearing would have made a sailor blush. 3 men and a very pissed-off woman were standing in the living room as we reached the top of the stairwell. "Fine," the woman said in protest as she stormed back into the kitchen while stripping off the black jacket and beanie that she wore. "We will discuss this later, Katyusha," the leader of the group called out without giving chase. "Smart. I need you to focus on the upcoming mission. We're going to be heading into the exclusion zone with 2 guests." He stopped talking when his eyes met mine. "That's right. We are your new battle buddies." Somewhere over Chernobyl. The crew compartment of the Soviet-era Mi-17 was completely blacked out to the naked eye, but was clear as day under the ghostly greenish-gray view of night vision. Sat behind me were 4 other people dressed in civilian clothing and armed to the absolute teeth with modified AKs, night vision goggles, and communications equipment. They weren't fellow SEALs or the Army's mythical CO.AG or Rangers. They were Spetsnaz, Russia's elite. They all sat silently while checking over their equipment as the deafening thrum of the helicopter's engine filled the void between us. There was nothing to say that had already been said when both of us agreed to work with them. Despite the fact that we fought for different countries, under different flags, and for different ideals, we were all united under one cause tonight.
"One mic out."
Elizabeth shouted over comms while cupping her free hand around the boom mic of the headset that was clipped to her combat helmet.
"Check."
I yelled back and gave her a thumbs up from my seated position near the open cargo doors as the water from the Pripyat River glistened in the moonlight beneath me. A spool of thick rappel line was stowed and waiting to be kicked free as soon as we reached the X. It felt just like the old times, but that feeling was quickly washed away by the grimace look on the woman's face as she made her way towards me from the front of the aircraft. "We have 15 minutes to get what we need and get out. If we fail to make it to the extraction, we are on our own." She took the seat behind me and waited for the signal. The helicopter made a sudden sharp turn and hovered above what looked like a small abandoned factory as dust from the rotor wash filled the air, nearly engulfing the roof and obscuring my vision. I wasted no time, and just like the dozens, if not thousands of times in the past, I booted the spool of rappel line out and was the first one down. Gravity did its job, and my boots hit the rooftop in a matter of seconds.
Without missing a beat, I moved the excess clump of line out to the left as Elizabeth landed in the spot I was in just a split second earlier, followed by the Spetsnaz commandos. I raised my rifle and pushed towards an open doorway that presumably led down to the ground floors. Please don't be collapsed. The metal stairwell was luckily intact. Graffiti lined the walls, along with words like "Leave" and "Turn back now" as I made my descent into the old building. The first landing was clear, but just as my boot hit the first step leading down to the second, something let out a bloody scream from the ground floor. Can't stop now. I pushed forward with my rifle at the ready as another blood-curdling scream came from one of the side exits, followed by another and another as I picked up the pace. Floor after floor, it seemed to never end until I spotted the faint glow of moonlight that penetrated the darkened interior of the ground floor from a massive hole in the wall. Time's ticking. Chunks of ceiling and concrete littered the ground as the ambient light from outside poured in through the gaping hole in the wall off to my right. Whatever was screaming had stopped, and we were left in dead silence. "Victor, take point." A cool Russian voice ordered from behind me as I pulled security. "Dima, Katyusha, bring up the rear." The faceless voice ordered next as a hulking bear of a man carrying a PKM light machine gun took a knee across from me. "You must be Dima." Victor took point, followed by the nameless operator that had given the order, along with Elizabeth, as I fell in line behind them. We kept up a fast pace and came to another factory building. Further down the street from us sat rows of what looked like stadium lights that sat in a semicircle at the center of a clearing. The sounds of machinery and diesel vehicles filled the air as we pushed on down the empty street.
"Alexei, we have a patrol coming up the road towards you from the south."
Katyusha's angelic voice called out over comms. Victor peeled off to the right into a thick cluster of vegetation, but kept up his pace. The massive halogen lights started to wash out my night vision. In hopes of saving my retinas, I tilted the device up slightly and squinted against the blinding lights. Are they hosting the next Olympic Games up here? Jesus. We broke out into a crossroads and quickly came upon a security checkpoint that was seemingly unmanned other than a UAZ that sat idle near a group of wooden crates and smaller storage facilities. Victor exhaled and scanned the interior of a small guard shack next to the UAZ to find a dead uniformed body. The poor bastard was missing his lower jaw and had his intestines ripped out. Just outside the shack lay another body that was missing its entire head and right arm. His weapon was still unsafe and lay beside him. "Move," Alexei whispered as an explosion rocked the earth. The stadium lights in the distance flickered briefly, then went out as sparks and a massive plume of smoke filled the sky in their place. Moments later, the all too familiar chatter of gunfire echoed from the site, followed by a high-pitched alarm that wailed like a grieving mother. As we got closer to the site, so did the smell of burning rubber and fuel that sent waves of nausea and a spike of pain through my already aching head.
"He should be escorted by 2 armed men wearing no uniforms."
Elizabeth spoke in a harsh whisper through my headset as we arrived on the outer perimeter of the site. "Holy," Victor finally spoke as he surveyed the gruesome aftermath of the explosion. Blobs of fire ran in all directions as others sat still while flashlights searched around the ruin in carnage for survivors. Whatever had detonated left a massive crater in its wake. Huge cranes that once stood towering were toppled, and cement trucks that were laying a base layer had been tossed into other construction equipment like toys. No time to waste. I tapped Victor's shoulder and pushed forward into the chaos. Screams of the wounded and dying carried through the air as we crossed the outer perimeter. The annoying siren was still wailing, and the survivors were starting their rescue efforts in pairs now. A man holding an AK in one hand and a flashlight in the other crossed my line of sight as I drifted past a pair of excavators. I lifted my rifle and squeezed the trigger once, dropping the man without a second thought. Another man who had been trapped under a piece of toppled equipment looked up and begged for help, only to be silenced by Victor. I was beginning to doubt that our target was here, until 2 men matching Elizabeth's description appeared on the far side of the crater, with a third man between them. From the looks of it, the third man had been wearing a lab coat at one point. but all that remained were now the brown and black tattered pieces of clothing that were beginning to turn a dark red. "He's there," I called out, changing my heading to intercept him. The adrenaline was burning through my veins now, and I was ready to put the crazy bastard in the dirt. But that thought was quickly extinguished when a chorus of gunfire and screams erupted from behind me. "Keep moving." My legs pumped against the uneven terrain, and the three men got closer. I moved through the twisted metal and downed equipment like a wraith, as the screams and gunfire increased with each step. A deep bass thump, thump, thump echoed out as a spotlight surged down through the darkness from a road above on the eastern side. It must have been a BTR-80 equipped with a 30mm cannon, because each time the low bass thump echoed out, large patches of concrete and dirt erupted from the ground like a geyser. In my peripheral vision, I could see figures pouring out from an entrance in the ground like a disturbed ant colony, despite taking hits from the devastating 30mm rounds. "Don't stop." I was close enough to see the two men struggle with the old man as they traversed up a flight of concrete stairs where a waiting vehicle sat waiting with a man scanning the area through the open hatch on the roof. I fired off a series of controlled bursts in their direction, causing them to hit the ground. One of the men rolled onto his side and returned fire instantly, causing rounds to spark off of the ground and remains of the toppled crane next to me. I exhaled and kept up the pace as the other man got up to his feet and started pulling the old man along while yelling into a handheld radio. I exhaled and steadied my rifle and fired back, clipping the man closest to Tolman in the back, causing him to fall back down the stairs. His partner cursed and returned fire. I felt a hard tug on my left shoulder and nearly fell on my ass. When I attempted to raise the rifle, my shoulder ached in protest, but I managed to get the sights on the man who had shot me. He was on his feet now and running up the stairs when he pitched forward into the old man. Blood and brain matter spewed from the missing half of his head as I made my way up the incline. Something was screaming as I cleared the first landing where the first man lay dead. I realized that the screaming was coming from me as I reached the top of the stairwell. A hard punch in the center of my chest sent me to the ground as Tolman pulled himself into the back of the seat. "No!" I struggled to raise my rifle and fired off an uncontrolled burst. The bullets raked the side of the vehicle as they took off into the night. "Not again!" The red tail lights grew smaller and smaller as I fought to steady my aim. "Come on." I fired off a single round, and the vehicle swerved before rolling over violently until hitting the side of an open factory bay door. Holy sh...
The escape vehicle has been disabled. Someone get to it now. We're running out of time.
Katyusha's quiet voice commented in my ears, and my legs were moving once again. The driver managed to crawl out first. He must have thought I was there to help, because he called out to me in pain while raising a bloody hand, only to have it fall when a bullet tore through the top of his skull and spilling the contents onto the pavement beneath him. I began to feel lightheaded as I rounded to the other side of the vehicle with my rifle raised. The headache was so painful now that it caused my vision to blur and my heart rate to increase with each pain-filled step. Crawling a few meters away from the vehicle towards the open bay was my target. A tattered lab coat was now soaked in black blood under the view of night vision. The madman struggled to crawl as his useless legs dragged behind him as I followed. "Tolman." The voice that spoke was hollow and void of all emotion. The man looked back over his shoulder. A wide, cloudy eye and one dark met mine with a burning hatred that had turned into sudden fear as I limped towards him. "You think this is the end, American? This is just the beginning." I emptied the remaining magazine into the man's body before swapping it out for a new one and putting 2 security shots into his head. I coughed hard twice and spit a glob of bloody spit onto the dead body, as the white noise that filled my ears drowned out everything else. "Target is down. I say again, target is down. Moving to the extraction point now." A distant voice spoke as my bloody hand fell from the PTT button and hit my side limply. It was getting harder to take in air and walk. Every little task was becoming damn near impossible as I made my way toward the exfil point.
"Foster, where are you?"
came Elizabeth's voice in my ears as 2 figures came running up the road towards me. No friendly identification markers. Bad guys. I struggled to raise my rifle, but fired off 3 rounds, causing the men to take cover.
He's making his way towards my height. I'll get him.
Came Katyusha's voice next, as I fought the overwhelming urge to vomit. 2 AKs opened up from behind me, and a searing white pain suddenly shot up my right arm, causing my rifle to fall on its sling as I shuffled into one of the opened industrial buildings. A clatter of metal on metal got my attention as I drew my sidearm from its holster and pointed it towards the noise. A slim figure carrying a modern-looking Dragunov SVD came rushing over with the rifle at the ready. "Get moving," a female voice ordered, as they took the corner of the entrance I had walked through and fired off 2 rounds before dipping back into the building. "Come on, we're running late." The Russian woman pulled me along in a hurry as another explosion shook the earth. I struggled to make it up the stairs as Dima let loose with the PKM on the ground floor. Those things that had spilled out from the site had swarmed and overrun the QRF that had arrived in an attempt to gain control over the situation. "I'm almost empty," the hulking man bellowed from the flight of stairs beneath us. "Empty! Moving!" Alexei shuffled past us and took position while firing single shots at whatever was coming up the stairs, as Dima scooted past him with his PKM in one hand and a fragmentation grenade in the other. "Move!" he shouted as he flung the grenade down the stairwell. The grenade detonated as soon as we reached the rooftop. The Mi-17 was at a low hover close enough to the building's edge. It allowed us to step aboard with ease. Katyusha helped me on board, then took a knee while sighting over her rifle. Elizabeth was the last through the door as several people fought to clear the small entrance. Some wore military fatigues, others were bare naked, but they all had black liquid pouring from their eyes, ears, and noses. "Come on!" I yelled while inching my way to the back of the bird, despite the pain it caused. Elizabeth was in a dead sprint now. As the helicopter began to slowly climb away from the building, Dima was firing his PKM full auto now, without picking targets. The large mass of bodies cleared the opening and spilled out onto the rooftop, as if a floodgate had just been opened. I could see the fear in Elizabeth's eyes as she made the jump. She leaped from the building, clutched for something to hold onto the side of the bird, as the upper half of her body hit the metal flooring with a dull thud. Alexei reached down and pulled her in by the back of her rig, as the helicopter's turbines whined and blade pounded in protest. She walked her way over to me and collapsed in the seat next to me as Victor performed first aid. "You're going to live, Comrade American," he said with a smile as Katyusha took her seat across from us. She leaned her head against the metal wall and started laughing. My eyes wandered to the back, spotting Dima, who remained seated at the back of the compartment with his PKM still at the ready, while scanning for threats as Alexei made his way up towards the front with no expression on his face. This is just the beginning. The laughter and light-hearted atmosphere got cut short when something slammed into the port side of the helicopter with such force. It caused us to bank off course briefly before leveling out after a few bumpy seconds. "What the hell?" Dima let out a muffled yell as he tightened his grip on the light machine gun in his hands and looked out into the inky blackness of night through the open cargo door only to see nothing. "What the hell was that?" His question was soon answered when a massive clawed hand slowly reached inside of the crew compartment from the top of the open bay door. Dima, upon seeing this, fell onto the metal floor and began scooting back towards the rest of us as a canine-like head filled my vision. A pair of large, glowing white eyes blinked as they peered inside at us from the top of the opening before suddenly retracting. Its sudden appearance reminded me of a bat as it stuck its head back inside the compartment and bared its teeth. Massive, sharp canines followed by rows of razor-sharp teeth showed under the glow of night vision as it opened its mouth and let out a loud growl. I spotted a black stencil tattoo in Russian that read Alpha, followed by the number 112 in the center of its massive, veined wing as it squeezed into the opening. The thing tilted its head to the side to get a better look at me and revealed a collar with a faint blinking red light strapped around its thick neck as Elizabeth raised the rifle after snapping out of her shock state. "No!" Alexei shouted, pushing the barrel of a rifle down as he rushed to the back of the compartment with a small booklet in hand, while cursing loudly over the thrum of the helicopter's turbine engines.
Shoot the damn thing!
She cursed, snapping into her rifle again, but now her shot was blocked by the Spetsnaz operator. Alexei ignored Elizabeth and bellowed something in Russian. The creature stuck its head further inside the compartment, coming face to face with Dima, who looked scared shitless as the creature snarled mere inches away from his face. Alexei yelled again, and the creature looked at him next as it tilted its head upwards, before releasing its grip and falling free from the compartment and out of sight. The feeling of relief was cut short when a series of high-pitched beeps and alarms screeched from the cockpit.
I swear if I die in a freaking helo crash. Hey pilot, are we good?
I shouted back towards the cockpit as the pilot's hands flew over the instrument panels, flipping switches and turning knobs, all the while singing a cheery folk song of some sort.
Yes, comrade, we are fine,
the pilot shouted back, barely audible over the chaos unfolding as I glanced out through the small bubble window to my right. My eyes were instantly greeted by a blur that I assumed were fields and clusters of trees that grew larger and larger by the passing second. We were in fact not fine. The helicopter dipped lower, and the pilot instructed all of us to brace for impact as the entire helicopter shuddered. We bounced hard once, then pitched forward as the sound of crunching metal and mechanical screams filled the air. After blinking a few times and feeling around for any broken bones and missing digits, I finally tilted the NVGs up away from my eyes and exhaled as the air began to smell of fuel and smoke. Find my ass. I went from the middle of the cargo bay to the rear near Dima, who was bleeding from a cut on his scalp. Can you move? Are you alright? Elizabeth asked while making her way towards me with a rifle slung across her chest. I feel like I've been shot twice while fighting off one of the most painful hangovers I've ever had in my entire life, I grunted while checking over everything again, in hopes of finding nothing new other than the still hurting wounds from earlier. Seriously, are you hurt? She asked again while punching in a series of numbers into a satellite phone that suddenly appeared in her left hand. I'm solid, I growled as the chubby old pilot who had crashed us into the ground squeezed into the open space between Elizabeth and me. Comrade American, he laughed with a gleeful smile. You did something tonight that I've wanted to do for the past 2 decades. But now, my friend, the real work begins. May your travels be kind. The old pilot slapped my wounded shoulder with large, calloused hand and pushed past without saying another word as I cursed at the excruciating pain under my breath. Elizabeth, who was now possibly the most pissed off I've ever seen her at one time, wound back with the sat phone in her hand like a professional pitcher and whipped it forward only to pocket it at the last second. Typical bureaucrat bullshit. Are you ready to move? We're running out of time here, and I don't feel like sitting in some Ukrainian prison for the next 4 days when the locals show up. I was starting up a smartass remark when an explosion of pain rippled up my back and nearly caused me to pass out from the pain as I attempted to stand up from the awkward sitting spot on the floor. After waiting for what felt like hours in that field, 4 blacked out G-wagons pulled towards us from a muddy access road to the south at a high rate of speed, which caused our Russian friends to all look in their direction. Great, who the hell are these guys? My question was partially answered when the vehicles parked while facing us with their lights on. A total of 6 men carrying a mix of compact weapons exited the vehicles and slowly made their way towards us without speaking. These friends of yours? I asked in a harsh whisper, while clenching the grip of the rifle still hanging by my side. Maybe. My assets said they'll be here shortly, so it might be them. Elizabeth tightened her grip on the handguard of her AK and nodded towards the group. If push comes to shove, I'm shooting my way out of here. If we had to fight, chances are we'd be screwed. Easy there, Butch Cassidy. I don't need any more holes in me. I gave her a toothy grin as we stopped short of the group and waited as they closed the distance. Besides, I doubt you could keep up with me when the bullets start flying. You two come with us, the apparent leader of the group ordered in Ukrainian as he stood across from us with his arms at his side. They all wore face coverings and hats. What's the authentication code? Elizabeth shot back in Ukrainian while shifting her stance. Echo 1 Oscar 2 1 Zulu, he answered confidently while gesturing back towards the group of vehicles.
We don't have much time left, ma'am. We must get going now. Elizabeth didn't release her grip on the rifle, but she did take a step forward as the men spread out around their leader in a semicircle. What site are we going to? She asked next as the men started walking back towards the lead vehicle. The only one within a 60-kilometer radius, ma'am. He answered, annoyed, as one of the men in the group tracked something with his rifle to our left. Your flight leaves in 3 hours. If you plan on making said flight, we need to leave now, ma'am. Hey, what about us? Dima shouted from the middle of his small group. We could use some help here. Your ride will arrive shortly. The Ukrainian's voice was filled with venom as he spoke. The man, whoever he was, clearly did not like the fact that a group of Russian Spetsnaz operators had just blown up an already screwed up power plant and crashed a probably stolen helo into some poor farmer's field. Bullshit, Katyusha mumbled next as Alexei shut down the sudden uptick in hostilities. See you around. Alexei gave us a nod and turned back to the helicopter. Dima, help me sanitize this bird. Katyusha, pull security. The last thing I need is some old farmer shooting me in the ass. Nevada, 2 months later. Elizabeth looked like she had just stepped out onto the surface of Mars wearing nothing but a bathing suit as we were escorted into a newly constructed office building on the famous Air Force Base. After a month of training exercises and doctor's appointments, it was nice to get out of the office for a bit. First time out here? I asked, trying to lighten up the mood, as one of the suit-clad men escorting us waved an access card over a scanner on the wall that unlocked a set of tinted glass doors that opened up into a large reception area. On this base in particular? Yeah, first time for me. You? She asked with a hint of nervousness in her voice as her expensive black heels clicked against the recently waxed marble floors. It was strange seeing her in something so formal and clean. No strained and tense shoulders from being weighed down by body armor. No scuffed combat helmet covering her clean and curled hair, or gloves covering her newly painted fingernails. I've lost count how many times the boys and I have been out here, so a few give or take. I blurted out and caught a "Are you for real?" look on her face out of the corner of my eye as we entered a massive elevator to our right, as we passed a series of office doors that lined the hall. Oh yeah, we tested some stuff that those nerds over at DARPA threw together, and we met this chief who... I stopped myself as one of the guards glanced over at me. Well, I can't go into details about it, but let me tell you, he'd make Aquaman jealous. Secret squirrel shit. Got it, she murmured while looking straight ahead. A few seconds later, there was an electronic chime, and the polished stainless steel doors slid open to reveal a small group of well-dressed men and women who were surrounded by armed guards across from us. You must be Jason. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. One of the older men in the group, who wore a Freemason ring, shook my hand, then gestured over towards a well-lit meeting room to our right. I have a golf session at Camp David coming up. Are you and Arnie going to join? Another man who wore a pair of thick reading glasses with an expensive Rolex hanging off his left wrist spoke to someone else in the room that I couldn't see as we were ushered into the meeting room. How was the meeting with Congressman Daniels? A younger-looking woman asked quietly as one of the men with graying short-cropped hair shook his head, no in response. Well then, I guess that trade deal with China can be tossed into the trash then. She let out a sigh and powered off her phone as we were escorted into the meeting room. There were a few more bits regarding an incident on the artificial islands in the South China Sea as I took a seat in a comfortable leather rolling chair at the conference table. Director Lewis, if you will start things off. A loud, squeaky voice belonging to a man pushing his late 60s commented, and the chatter quickly died down. The meeting itself was a long and quiet, frankly boring one. I went over operational details when prompted and spoke when told to. After the interrogation, we were taken to a small site room that overlooked the flight line. Am I going to get disappeared? I finally asked aloud, feeling exhausted and not caring if the room they set us in happened to be booked or not. Elizabeth actually laughed at this statement and shook her head. No, you're not getting disappeared, Jason. Chances are they're discussing how to get you on the team as a permanent member. You're a valuable asset to these guys and my team, so I doubt they want to do anything to jeopardize that.
The thoughts of being thrown in some dark hole away from my loved ones and team genuinely terrified me, especially since I had followed Alice down the rabbit hole, so to speak. And if these people, whoever they were, really wanted me gone, all they had to do was make a phone call. What's going on in there? Elizabeth tilted her head to the side, causing her hair to shift, revealing a dark bruise peeking under her hairline. I can see the smoke pouring out from your ears. What has your gears churning, big guy? Now it was my turn to laugh. You know, if I ever decided to tell the guys or anyone about any of this, I gestured around the room. They just laugh and call me crazy. And I really don't know what to believe anymore. Do you remember what I told you back in Afghanistan, when I first brought you on? She asked as she pulled off her heels and rubbed her feet. Of course I do. That whole rah-rah speech nearly brought a tear to my eye. I joked, only to have her throw one of her heels at my head like a damn throwing star. Hey, look, I'm sorry. I picked up the now scuffed shoe and held it out towards her as a peace offering. What you told me back in Afghanistan makes more sense now than ever, and it has kept me on the rails. Seriously, I owe you one. Elizabeth cracked a smile and grabbed the proverbial olive branch from my hand before leaning her head back against the wall. What a lifestyle we live. We do all this dangerous shit just day to day, unthanked and unnoticed if things go right. But when shit goes sideways, we are offered up as sacrificial lambs to save face. Preaching to the choir there, sister. Oh, I almost forgot. Here's a little something to remember me and the boys by. I dug around in the back pocket of my jeans and pulled out a faded and worn squadron patch that traveled with me all over the globe. It has been one hell of a ride. If you're ever in my AO and need any help, just holler. I'll come running. She nodded and traced over the patch with her fingertips while remaining silent. This is, well, thanks. I'll make sure to reach out if I need anything. Elizabeth was about to say something else when the door to the room opened and a bald head wearing an earpiece poked in through the opening. Sir, ma'am, it's time to leave. Please come with us. Our suit-wearing friend fully opened the door and gestured out to the hall. Time to go home. Virginia, present day. Good to have you back, Jason. Smith clapped me on the shoulder as we geared up in the team room for an upcoming training exercise. How's the, He tapped on his helmet with his index finger while standing in the doorway of my cage. Good. The doc gave me some new meds to help with the pain, but I don't think I need them anymore. I responded, picking up my rifle from the workbench it sat on. It was damn good to finally be back. Listen up. Brock's baritone voice echoed around the room as he entered through the main doorway. There's been a change of plans. The live fire drills are cancelled. Jason, Smith, and Lamb, you're needed in the skiff. He sounded on edge and didn't bother looking in my direction as he exited the room. I shook my head and stowed my rifle in gear quickly before turning to Smith with a frown. What was that all about, dude? Mexico, bro. Smith responded quietly as we exited the team room and made our way towards the skiff. Do you remember the new kid? I nodded and looked around for the new kid, only to find him absent from the group. Smith shook his head and nodded towards Brock. Well, the kid shot a pregnant woman and nearly got Brock killed in the process. So that's what has him all wound up? I asked as we made the final stretch to the meeting room. Yeah, it was a total shit show, bro. Smith brought his voice down to a whisper as we passed some other team guys. We were tracking our HVI through a tunnel system under his freaking house after shooting up half the goddamn neighborhood. Anyway, Brock got jumped by the HVI's wife when we emerged from one of the openings in the tunnel system. Smith looked around a few times before leaning in. She latched onto Brock with a knife in her hand, but he had it under control. I nodded in thought as I deposited my phone in the small box mounted to the wall next to the ugly greenish-brown door. What about the HVI? He got away. The kid stopped chasing him and popped his wife and missed the shooter in a small dugout in the wall. Smith stopped talking when he noticed Brock looking in our direction. It's good to have you back, Senior Chief. The skipper's voice brought me back to earth as he extended his hand out to me. It's good to be back, sir. I shook his hand and glanced over at Brock, who took a seat on the opposite side of the table next to Lamb, our dog handler. "What's on the list today?" I asked, before making my way over to Brock's side of the table.
Is everyone here?
He asked as I took a seat next to Brock, who seemed off. Lamb confirmed Skipper's question, and he simply nodded in response, before introducing someone up at the front of the table who I hadn't noticed when we entered.
Chance,
"This is Dr. Amanda Pierce." He introduced a petite woman with dusty brown hair. "Dr. Pierce is one of the leading field investigators at the CDC, and she has recently found something in Alaska that has the POTUS and everyone else in DC worried. Ma'am, you have the floor." Dr. Pierce thanked the skipper and looked around at all of us. "Gentlemen?" Her voice carried a faint East Coast accent as she spoke. "And just a quick warning, what you're about to see is very graphic." This statement got a few chuckles from Smith and Lamb, but the humor was lost on the good-hearted doctor as she cleared her throat. "I have uncovered a biological outbreak of some kind during my recent investigation of the native wildlife species in the Alaskan wilderness." On one of the monitors behind her, a gruesome scene filled the screen. A group of 5 campers were scattered around their campsite in various states of mutilation. Some had clothes, while others were almost naked. Inside one of the tents that were still intact laid a man missing half of his right leg and most of his genitalia. And to top off this nightmare fuel, there was a screwdriver sticking out from his right eye socket. Poor bastard. Next was a female camper that had a wood-cutting axe buried in the top of her skull. She held a flare gun in her right hand and a cell phone in the other. They were all friends attending college who flew out for one last trip before heading back to finish up their final college semesters. Dr. Pierce's voice was flat as she continued to speak as I studied the images. After going over a few more details on who these people were and why they were out there, a video began to play on another monitor, and everyone in the room fell completely silent. The video showed the doctor, and who I presumed was her guide, and a wildlife and game officer walking up to one of the bodies impaled on a jagged tree branch that protruded out from the ground just a few steps outside of the camp near a thick tree line. The impaled man remained still until the guide bumped into his leg, causing the not-so-dead man to suddenly thrash around, causing the guide to scream before a massive caribou burst from the tree line in front of them. The guide gasped and backpedaled as the game officer raised the bolt-action rifle and fired once, taking a huge chunk out of the bull's side. The bull let out a pain-filled bleat while charging forward and slamming into the guide with full force, knocking him to the ground as it tore off into the woods. "Did you catch it?" The doctor spun around towards the monitor, then back towards us like an excited parent. "What, the dead guy suddenly moving? Or the guide screaming louder than my ex-wife?" Lamb joked before getting a stern look from the skipper. The doctor rolled her eyes as she slowed down the video, revealing something we had missed completely. The caribou was missing a huge chunk from its left flank, and its ribcage was shredded to ribbons in the still shot it was paused on. "That is all, gentlemen. Thank you for your time, Captain Locke." The doctor smiled over at the skipper before being dismissed from the room. "Now, your primary objective is this." The skipper pointed towards another monitor where a live feed began to play. The feed showed what appeared to be a Russian heavy transport plane, along with 2 Su-35Es accompanying it at a high altitude. "These guys have entered the Air Defense Identification Zone and been turning donuts over at the Bering Sea for the past hour, after our F-22s showed them out of our airspace after they decided to try and push the boundary. The situation is still developing, so I'll keep you all updated when more details come in." "They went right over the site where the doctor found the bodies, didn't they?" Smith spoke up as he rubbed his wrists. The skipper took a deep breath and nodded. "I've talked with the SecDef and the POTUS and his staff, who have all agreed to send you guys in as an effort to keep things calm on both sides of the table between the US and Russia." Brock quietly sighed and looked down at Silva, our dog, and gave her a few pats on the head before looking over at me. "Good to have you back, Jason." "Gentlemen," the skipper tapped on the table, this time getting Brock's attention. "If you happen to encounter any Russian SF teams on the ground, it is imperative that you do not engage unless fired upon. It's bad enough we have this virus ravaging the nation right now, gentlemen. I don't need to add dead Russians to that list of problems right now. With that being said, here's how we're going to do this thing." Alaska. What remained of the campsite was a total mess, and it was evident that something or someone had torn through the place before we had arrived. Of course, the park rangers had no clue what had happened, and just chalked it up to wild animals getting to the scene. We knew better.
This is a waste of time, Chief.
Smith shook his head as we headed back towards the ranger station, under the scattered moonlight underneath the thick forest canopy overhead.
Got that right.
I grunted while scanning the surrounding area with the flashlight that was on the packing list. What are the chances that our friends have already dipped with the tissue samples from these poor bastards and are swimming back to the motherland as we speak?
Hi.
Smith smirked as he scanned our rear flank with his flashlight when something caused a tree limb to snap off to our left. Whatever had made the noise had stopped and was probably listening for us now as we scanned the area with our Glocks raised and ready to fire.
Break it down, gents. Our job here is done.
Brock's voice sounded like an explosion in my earpiece as I scrambled for the volume knob on my radio. We've been on target for less than an hour. There is no way we got everything. We finally arrived back at the medium-sized ranger station after a few minutes of walking to hear a heated conversation carried in our direction from the open front door at the top of the wooden staircase to our front as we closed the distance.
I've already explained myself once, ma'am. I will not do it again.
An older park ranger with snow-white hair growled as Dr. Pierce paced around the room with her arms at her side.
Bullshit,
Pierce mumbled as she balled both of her hands into fists.
We will get the reports and be on our way then, Ranger Tyson.
The old park ranger's face turned red as he shot up from the old office chair that he was seated in.
I'll have your damn reports faxed to your office after CSI arrives in the following days.
He pointed a pudgy finger at the doctor before looking over towards one of his subordinates who wandered around the room aimlessly.
Ranger Patrick, please escort these people off the premises.
Ranger Patrick took a look in my direction before looking right back at his boss with a look that said, "Are you sure?"
Now, damn it!
Spittle flew from Ranger Tyson's lips as Pierce beat the young park ranger to the punch and headed out the door with Lamb and Silva close behind her.
Bullshit. This is all bullshit,
Dr. Pierce mumbled as she pulled open the rear passenger door of the SUV we had driven in.
Can one of you guys come with me to the site?
I forgot something. The doctor's gaze drifted around the cab of the vehicle until it landed on me.
Please?
Make it fast, Doctor. I gave Smith and Lamb a nod, then joined Pierce as she walked down the trailhead where the tattered remains of the campsite lay.
Hey, check this out.
Dr. Pierce finally spoke after the awkward silent walk. The beam from her flashlight was hovering over a black box of some sort near one of the destroyed tents near the drop-off at the edge of the camp. Well over 100 feet below lay jagged rocks and clusters of pines that would spell the end for anyone if they fell. She reached down and picked the box up, turning it over with her fingers in one hand as she read off something Russian.
Tracking device,
she spoke, flipping the device back over to reveal a thick leather strap of some sort that had been torn.
Drop it,
a low voice commanded in heavily accented English as a dark figure emerged from the tree line to our right. The person was clad in black clothing and combat gear and was carrying a heavily modified PP-19 that was pointed directly at my chest as they continued to walk.
Don't even think about it,
the voice growled as my hand crept towards the concealed Glock on my flank. The figure kept the weapon centered on my chest and ordered Dr. Pierce to drop the box.
Do it.
I looked at Dr. Pierce with a reassuring nod as I stopped reaching for the Glock and raised my hands.
You'll be okay. Trust me.
Dr. Pierce said nothing and dropped the box, causing it to clank against the rocky flooring beneath as the dark figure bent down to pick up the box.
Don't try to follow me. It will only end badly for you.
The figure backed up to the tree line and disappeared into the darkness. After a few seconds, heart-pounding seconds, I drew my weapon and gave chase as Dr. Pierce tried to keep up.
What the hell?
Dr. Pierce cursed when she bumped into me.
Oh my God.
Her voice was now shaking as her eyes met with what looked like a giant winged bat dog that stared down at us from a massive pine tree in front of us.
Don't run.
I ordered in a harsh whisper as the bat dog slowly traversed down the large tree with its clawed hands and feet. The stare-off continued as I slowly began to back up with the doctor behind me. It tilted its head once more, then leaped down from the tree with an audible thud as a thin layer of dust filled the air from where it impacted. I pulled the trigger 3 times in rapid succession and shoved Pierce towards the trail as the creature let out a cry that caused all the wildlife around us to scatter. Shit, that was a bad idea. Run! I was on Pierce's heels as she tore through the underbrush. I nearly toppled over her as she stumbled over a loose patch of dirt. Come on, move it! I pushed her forward as something slammed into my back, sending me flying past the doctor, who had suddenly gone inverted. Holy shit! Someone called as deafening sounds of gunfire rippled through the night. Covering! Go and get Jason! Another voice ordered as I rolled onto my back. Smith's face suddenly filled my vision as the gunfire tapered off. I'm getting real tired of dragging your ass in here, Chief. That thing is still out there. Dr. Pierce's voice cracked as she looked around for our attacker. Is he going to be okay? She asked next, filling my vision as she stood at Smith's side with my Glock in hand. What the hell was that thing? Smith asked as we entered Ranger Station. A flying freaking bat dog, I spat as Dr. Pierce began to hyperventilate. Hey, look at me. Count backward from 100. I gave the doctor's shoulder a quick squeeze, then checked over my weapon before placing it back into its holster. As the park rangers began to ask hundreds of questions, Smith shook his head and scanned outside for any signs of the bad dog as I explained what had happened while leaving out the dark-clothed Russian. Shit, we have to call this in. The old park ranger blurted out, causing his double chin to wobble as he reached over the phone on his desk. Patrick, Mackenzie, get the rifles and ammo from the lockers. The 2 park rangers ran off towards the back of the building, then returned a few seconds later with 2 AR-15s, along with 2 12-gauge shotguns slung over each shoulder with arms full of ammo for each firearm. Let's hope we have enough ammo to kill this damn thing. The attractive female park ranger picked up one of the shotguns and loaded a slug round as she spoke. Shit, the phone line is down. The old park ranger, whose name tape read Eugene, cursed before exhaling. Alright, once we get everyone armed, let's make a run for the vehicles and get the hell out of here. Silva began to yap as Lamb pulled her in close to his side. She finally stopped when he commanded and looked up at Lamb, then over to me with a look that said, There's something out there, stupid. Why isn't anyone listening to me? Amidst the chaos, Patrick walked over towards the front door of the station with his hand still on his holstered service weapon. Upon seeing this ballsy move by the young park ranger, I patted Smith on the shoulder and nodded towards Patrick. As he cupped a hand over his eyes in an attempt to get a better view outside, Smith groaned and began to yell across the room at the careless park ranger. Hey, get away from the window. You're going to get hurt. Patrick turned back around to face us and began to make a smart-ass comment. A large, dark shadow appeared behind him. He saw the worry on Mackenzie's face, and a look of confusion washed over him as the glass pane and most of the door behind him exploded into shards, as 2 large clawed hands sunk into his ribcage, pulling him out into the darkness in a matter of seconds. Pat! Mackenzie yelled, as the screams from her friend died out after a few minutes of struggle. Jesus Christ, what the hell was that thing? I told you. I shot back while scooping up one of the shotguns and frantically began loading shells as Ranger Tyson sat stunned in his chair. There's something out there, and it is going to kill us unless we all work together here. What's the plan? Ranger Mackenzie asked as she trained her shotgun on the destroyed doorway. I say we hold tight and wait for daybreak. We're safer in here than out there, I suggested while scanning the windows for any sign of movement. Boss, your call. Brock grunted and grabbed one of the AR-15s before speaking. I agree. Let's lock it down. It's going to be a long night. Nobody slept, mostly due to the fact that a giant bat dog the size of a small truck was romping around in the woods just mere inches away, just waiting to eat us. But luckily for us, a SWAT team from a nearby town managed to get one of Ranger Tyson's distress calls before the lines went down. We're on our way back to the airstrip now, sir. Brock held the large sat phone to his ear as I turned us on the unmarked dirt road. "Understood, sir. I'll let her know as soon as we get there." "What was that all about?" I asked as the small black outlines of a private jet along with a small cluster of buildings filled the horizon. Brock exhaled and looked in the rearview mirror at the now sleeping doctor. "I'll fill you in once we are in the air." 41,000 feet above sea level. Once the stewardess walked back towards the front of the plane, Brock finally moved from his seat and made his way back towards me without stopping at any of the occupied seats. "Skipper just received orders that we are to deploy once we land back in Virginia. It sounds like something big. The whole squadron is being spun up." "The whole squadron?" "Here's the thing, Jason." Brock looked around at the rest of the team as he spoke. "I've decided that you should stay stateside until you're all cleared by the dock." "What are you talking about? I'm good to go, boss." I pleaded my case as Brock looked around the cabin to see if anyone else was listening. "Look, I can't have you being a liability out on the field, and you know that. And if those headaches come back and we're in the thick of it, you could get someone killed. Get the doctors to figure out what's wrong and work the problem." My heart sunk. The whole squadron was being spun up for some major op, and now was being sidelined again due to the goddamn headaches. I gave Brock a nod and stood up from my seat to see the rest of the team. Smith was sleeping just a few rows behind us. Dr. Pierce was typing away on her laptop. Lamb and Silva were lounging up at the front with the stewardess, who was showing much love to the Meligator. Virginia. I said my goodbyes once we landed and watched as the squadron and their support staff made their way to the waiting C-17 out on the busy flight line. Stupid headaches. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I was greeted by a restricted number. Who the hell? I answered the call and was met with a familiar voice.
"Jason, we need to talk."
Elizabeth's voice cut over loud music and cheery voices in the background as I made my way towards my truck on the other side of the parking lot. "Where?" I asked as I put the truck in drive and headed towards the main entrance of the Naval Air Station.
"Are you familiar with Manny's pup?"
Elizabeth asked as I showed one of the guards my common access card that was hanging off my rearview mirror. The young sailor gave the card a quick look over, then handed it back as he signaled the guard inside the small station to the left of him to lower the steel pop-up barricades that blocked the road. "Every East Coast SEAL does. Why?" I asked, giving the guard a nod as I drove towards the well-known dive bar.
"Meet me there. There's something I have to show you."
When I arrived, I spotted Elizabeth just a few steps inside of the bar next to a row of booths that lined the wall near the entrance. Pictures of fallen service members filled the walls, along with unit patches and stickers to commemorate the fallen. I tapped on the wooden booth, causing her to jump as I took my seat. "What brings you all the way down here? I'd figured that you'd be on the other side of the globe right now." Elizabeth frowned and sat across from me as she pulled out a small laptop from a bag she had brought in. "Look, what I am about to show you is going to get the both of us into some deep shit. If you want to walk away, do it now." All of the light-hearted banter and good feelings were suddenly sucked out of the room like a vacuum chamber. "What is it?" I asked, leaning in as she opened the laptop and began typing away. "Something that they've been hiding from us," she responded as she flipped it around towards me. A familiar-looking hallway filled the screen as she hit the spacebar. "I'm sorry, Jason." The video played, and the camera panned from left to right at someone's waist as they walked. Then, the camera shuddered once before stopping on an open door. Just inside the room were 3 individuals. 2 of them were in hazmat suits, while the other individual lay tied down to a bed, naked, with soiled sheets underneath them. One of them then pulled a scalpel from an instrument tray and cut it into the bound person's forearm, causing them to scream out in pain. When the person thrashed around and raised their head, my blood ran cold, and I struggled to comprehend who I had just seen on the screen. "Townsend, you're supposed to be dead. What the hell was that?" I gritted my teeth as Elizabeth shook her head. "That," she pointed at the men who I had watched get buried in Arlington, is something Dr. Schmidt had been hiding without anyone else knowing. Up until now, Elizabeth answered while packing up the laptop. Look, you need to keep your eyes open because he's coming after you next. What makes you think that I'm going to go willingly? Elizabeth slipped a card into my hand and gestured to the exit as I inspected it. There was only a handwritten number and a red logo that I had seen only once before back in Afghanistan when I was first brought onto the team. You're going in a body bag, or with my help. She paused for a brief second and looked down at her feet before meeting my gaze. Look, Jason, I hate to say it, but you're on my list now, and I don't want to do this. She pulled out a small capped syringe from her jacket pocket and held it in her hand as we stopped at my truck just a block down from the bar. This syringe has a sedative that will make you unconscious for a few hours. It will keep you out until they get you to him. Once you're awake, do what you do best. The plan sounded simple enough, but I knew better. And if I end up tied to a table just like Townsend, what do I do then? You hold out as long as you can. She scanned the road for any unwanted eyes before continuing. Look, I know you just got back, and this is a lot to take in right now. This is crazy. I just watched one of my— Lower your voice, Elizabeth hissed as I swung my truck door open and jumped in the driver's seat. The psychopath is going to get what's coming to him, but you have to trust me, Jason. Do you trust me? After all the crazy events leading up to now, I was always on the fence. I muttered as I held onto the keys that sat in the ignition. But seeing how you didn't outright shoot me in the face or drug me when I first arrived, I'd say that I do trust you to an extent. Good, she smirked as prickling pain shot up my arm. I cursed and lifted it up to see the syringe sticking out through my shirt. Son of a bitch. I have your back. Be strong. Location: unknown. Where did you find him? A distant voice filled the black void that I was floating around in as my senses slowly came back. A local bar. He was passed out in his truck according to the ground team. Another voice joined in. That's been a recent pattern with him. The headaches must have been hitting harder and harder. How much time does he have left? Hard to tell. He's been fighting off the medication that I've been giving him. Could be a week, could be a day. Searing white light filled the dark void as someone tilted my head from left to right. Give me an update on his vitals and get a line put in him and get someone to stage the crash. I don't need anyone else asking questions. We're already under the microscope as it is. A pair of cold, gloved hands began to look through my pockets before stopping abruptly. Doctor, we have a problem. What is it? An annoyed voice shot back as the light moved away from my face. This, the other voice commented as the ruffle of clothes being tossed on the floor along with the other items filled my ears. Shit, the doctor yelled as something metallic clattered against the floor. It's bad enough he killed the only man who could help me with. The voice grew further away as I got strapped into a cold chair before things got quiet again. The ground began to move beneath me as a cool gust of air hit my face. Everything was still dark, but I could still smell and feel and hear as radio chatter and hushed voices filled my ears before suddenly dying out as the heavy door closed. Wake him up, a tired voice ordered as a stinging pain flared up in my left thigh. A few moments passed as the most dreadful pain that I've ever felt began to work its way up my legs as I slowly came to my senses. The scream that followed was involuntary, but I couldn't stop it as the pain began to spread throughout my entire body. How are you feeling, Jason? I bet it's bad, huh? I injected you with a little homemade brew that's killing you as I speak. My eyes snapped open to see Dr. Schmidt frowning as he pulled on white latex gloves over his hands. Did you know that Tolman and I studied together at the same university? We became really good friends, actually. He had a dream of helping people, and so did I. That's when we decided to work together for the greater good. The doctor grabbed a small scalpel and held it inches away from my eyes as his voice began to shake with anger. We were so close to making something that would have benefited the entire human race, and you fucked it all up by killing him and not taking my offer. The blade cut through the soft tissue of my cheek and made it all the way down to the bone as the crazy old man cut down the left side of my face with a shaking hand. "I don't know how you managed to survive," Schmidt sighed as he sat back in the stool, just an arm's reach away as Brock's word came trickling back into my mind like an unwanted memory as tears filled my eyes. "I feel like we're covering up their mistakes." My team leader's disembodied voice filled my ears as a smile began to form over the doctor's wrinkled face. Subject Delta 15 is showing conclusive results after several months after initial exposure to the Echo variant. A female voice suddenly spoke from behind me as Schmidt ran the blade down my right arm without flinching. The skin parted with ease and blood began to flow freely on the tile flooring, like a running tap as the room began to spin with each passing second. "Stay awake, Jason, because this is just the beginning. Stay strong. You have to stay strong." Schmidt frowned and grabbed a pair of medical shears from his pocket. "Did you know that these shears can cut through a penny?" He inspected the tool with an unamused look on his face. "Do you think they can cut through a human finger?" He opened the blades wide and stuck my pinky finger between them. "Let's test it out." There was a loud crunch and a white-hot pain that radiated up my left arm as he held out the tip of my severed finger. "It worked," he laughed as I looked down at the bleeding stump where my finger had once been. I screamed in pain and squeezed my left arm around the metal armrest of the chair, causing it to bend slightly. "What the hell?" Schmidt didn't notice and continued to laugh as I pulled against the padded restraint that bound my right wrist to the chair, causing it to creak. "Doctor?" the female voice warned before I snapped the restraint completely free. A look of horror suddenly spread across Schmidt's face as I loosened the other restraint with my bleeding arm. Get help now!" he screamed in a panic as I stood up from the chair with a shaking step. A woman in green scrubs attempted to run past me, but I managed to grab her and pull her in. She yelped and I turned my attention back to Schmidt, who was scooting towards the large metal door that was still locked behind him. I took one step forward and my foot landed on something cold and wet. When I looked down, I spotted the scalpel that he had used to carve up my face. And with a grim smile, I picked it up and examined it once, before making my way to the screaming doctor with the woman still in tow. "Jason, listen to me. You will die if you leave this room without me. Guards are already on their way, and if you hurt me, they'll..." A look of confusion suddenly spread over the old man's face as his fingers gingerly touched the scalpel sticking out of his neck. He coughed once, sending a spray of blood all over me and the woman in my grasp as he suddenly realized what had just happened. A wet, gurgling noise began to escape from his lips, and I realized the woman in the scrubs as she scrambled with the door lock. "Oh God, oh my God!" I reached over and unlocked the door with a steady hand as Schmidt stumbled out through the opening past her while clutching his neck. "Doctor?" I followed him as he ran into another lab coat-wearing woman who screamed upon seeing him. And as if on cue, an alarm began to blare and a voice began shouting orders over the intercom system.
"All staff members, there's been a level 4 breach. I say again, there's been a level 4 breach. Follow evacuation protocol Alpha Sierra."
The message repeated on a loop as people rushed past me like a wave of human bodies. Was I really that big of a deal? My gaze slowly drifted towards Schmidt now as he lay in a pool of his own blood. "You should have never let me walk out of here." Please, he gurgled as the sounds of frantic footsteps grew closer and closer with each passing second. "You," he wheezed. "You're a monster." I frowned at his comment and lifted up my hand, expecting to see a missing pinky finger. To my surprise, the finger was intact with a jagged scar where the doctor had cut it free moments earlier. What the hell? I locked eyes with the dying doctor and tried not to fly off the handle. "What the hell did you do to me?" Schmidt had gone 10 shades paler and was praying as I flexed my hand stiff. "You didn't think this would happen, did you?" He croaked something in response that I couldn't understand. "Of course you didn't." I mumbled as a group of guards clad in black tactical gear rounded the corner with their weapons raised. "Hang in there, Townsend. I'm gonna get you out of here, brother."
Jesus Christ,
one of the men shouted as the life drained from Schmidt's face.
"He fucking killed him!"
Another yelled. They snapped to their senses and trained their weapons on me.
"Let me see your fucking hands."
I complied and raised my bloodied hands up high as my vision began to fade in and out.
"Somebody get the director on the goddamn line!"
A frantic voice called out next as I got up to my feet unwillingly. That's when things shifted. It felt like I was sitting back and watching things unfold in a movie theater. As one of the guards attempted to reach out and cuff me, that's when my hand shot out and gripped onto his wrist without me having any control. With one hard pull, the man's arm was ripped free from its socket like a straw man, sending a spray of blood in all directions. The rest of the guards shouted in fear upon seeing this and began to fire round after round at close range. Before things went black. Bubba's truck stop. I have Townsend with me now, and we're still alive and kicking. Now, I don't know how we got here, or how I'm still breathing, but that's beside the point. Now you know everything that has led up to this moment. I know that this all sounds like some kind of fucked up fever dream, but it's true. All of it. I wish I could say that there's a happy ending here for us, but there isn't. We're being followed as I type this out, and it's only a matter of time before those suit-wearing assholes eventually catch up to us. If anyone on the team finds this, don't believe a word they say. We're not traitors. I've included a series of video files along with the coordinates and photos of each site these assholes are operating out of on the East Coast. In case we get rolled up and you never hear from us again, follow the trail. If anyone else finds this, do what you want with the information. If you decide to hide or destroy it, I don't blame you. I wouldn't wish this hell on anyone. The following is a handwritten note that was found at the truck stop by members of the ground team. Despite all the misinformation out there regarding what has happened, one fact still remains. We covered up their mistakes. Now, I'm one of them.